for Jalen Brunson, allow him to operate at the top, 1-on-1.
Brunson gets it, fires up a three. Shot no good, the chip, it's gone! It's gone! It's gone! With 1.2 remaining, Knicks take the lead. OG Anunoby, and it's 107-106.
History made at Madison Square Garden last night by a team that has been on the wrong side of history over and over and over again. Hello, how are you? Drive time Thursday afternoon, 12 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. Appreciate you making us a part of your day. We've got a lot to get to on the program. Of course, the NBA Finals, an unbelievable night in New York City at Midtown Manhattan at Madison Square Garden as the New York Knicks take a 3-1 lead over the San Antonio Spurs, and it was a miracle. So many things had to go right for the Knicks to come back from a 29-point deficit, which has literally never happened before in the history of the NBA Finals. So we're going to get into it on the show today, but of course, that's not the only thing that's going on. The 2026 FIFA World Cup has kicked off. Mexico leads South Africa 1-0 right now. The U.S. men's national team in action tomorrow. The latest on the Brendan Sorsby situation with the Attorney General of the state of Texas getting involved, threatening the Big 12 with legal action should the Big 12 decide they want to act. So we'll get into that on the show today. Epic shot making from those two specifically, quite frankly, and maybe only those two, as OG Anunoby is now a golden god in New York. And certainly it took a lot of help from the other side, an epic collapse from the San Antonio Spurs. And look, this series is far from over, okay? When you look at the 3 wins the Knicks were able to get so far, they've been kind of 3 very dramatic wins that were mandated with other mistakes from the team on the other side. You got the Victor Wembanyama turnover in Game 2 when he threw it off the back of Stephon Castle. An unbelievable comeback to get that Game 1 win. And then last night, whether it was horrible shot making, unbelievably misguided defensive assignments down the stretch. De'Aaron Fox is going to have to wear this for a long, long time. But if you are a Knicks fan, certainly you've been waiting a long, long time, namely 53 years. The last time the Knicks won the NBA championship, 27 years since the last time the Knicks were in the NBA Finals. And I can tell you, I have been in that building for so many epic shots. Usually they come from the other team. The New York Knicks have been on the wrong side of history, as I said, over and over and over. OG Anunoby's tip in with just a number of about 1.7 seconds left. You put that up alongside Larry Johnson's 4-point play against the Pacers to go to the finals. Patrick Ewing's tip in against the Pacers to also go to the NBA Finals. Any epic Knicks shot, OG Anunoby's tip in last night is right up alongside that. What a night. What a game. So the Knicks riding high now in San Antonio as a young team. I don't know how you bounce back from that. All right, a lot to do on a Thursday show. We'll start things off with Ed Peterson. Now, Ed is a friend of the show, and let me just set this up real quick. The Brendan Sorsby situation has a lot of layers, okay? Now, the reason they were granted the injunction, and as of now he is going to be allowed to play college football this year, is Jeffrey Kessler and Brendan Sorsby's legal team have been able to convince people that Brendan Sorsby is an addict in need of help and treatment. And if you take away his ability to play college football, you're going to get in the way of him being better, getting better. Ed is, Ed is an addiction specialist. So instead of pretending as a sports talk radio host, I have a doctor's degree, a medical degree, or I'm a psychiatrist, I wanted to bring Ed in to help us understand what the medical community believes about the dynamic of gambling as an addiction and maybe give us a little perspective on what Brendan Sorsby is actually going through and what the treatment looks like. And can you help us understand what Jeffrey Kessler and Brendan Sorsby are trying to basically say is going on with him? And I don't want to say it is or it is not, because I just don't know. So we'll bring Ed in today. Craig Bolerjack, TV voice of the Utah Jazz, will join us. We're less than 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. We're less than a month away from NBA Summer League. And then a couple of really good college football guests, Ryan McGee from ESPN, and then Spencer Hall, one of my favorites to talk college football with. So Ed Peterson, Ed Peterson, Craig Bolerjack, Ryan McGee, Spencer Hall. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. And Porter, I don't even know what to ask you. We were texting a little bit back and forth, and our guy Easton was texting us, and it was 72-49. I don't even there are so many things we'll get into, but what was it like for you to watch that comeback last night?
I still don't really know how to put it into words as a Knicks fan watching that game. Now, this team specifically gave me a reason to keep the game on, right? To keep watching, just in case the basketball gods were somewhat in our favor. But to see it unfold, and to see it unfold like that, where not only do you cut into the lead, but then you make a bunch of mistakes right at the end that feel like you've given up the lead that you took back, right? Victor Wembanyama hit a jump shot, made it a 7-point game again. The Josh Hart miss and foul, the missed free throws, and then, of course, San Antonio really kind of helping you out down the stretch. Everything, as you mentioned, had to go in the Knicks' favor, and it very much did. And I'm still reeling a little bit, still buzzing from what I saw last night. There is nothing to really match it when it comes to my fandom in the sports world. I've never experienced anything like that, and I hope 48 more minutes and we can, I guess, relax a little bit, breathe a sigh of relief, and party a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll see. The Knicks are one win away from winning their first championship in 53 years. The series moves back to San Antonio. They're going to take tomorrow night off for travel, so that game is going to be Saturday at 6:30 Mountain Time. And if there is a Game 6, a nervy Game 6, if San Antonio gets Game 5, it's going to be coming up next week on Tuesday. So let's get into it. A lot to do on the show. Our first guest will be Ed Peterson, but before Ed stops by, courtesy of our good friends at DraftKings, it is time now for your opening tip. Now, DraftKings Sports is live in all 50 states. Yes, that means you, Utah. The whole world is watching one tournament right now. Group stage chaos, knockout drama, stoppage time, heartbreak. The DraftKings Sports app is now live in Utah. So whether you're catching the early kickoff before work or the late match at the bar, you're in on every minute, every match, every moment. All in on one app. It's the world's biggest stage, and it is in the palm of your hands. New DraftKings customers, you sign up with code ESPN 700, spend $5 to get $200 in total rewards. That's code ESPN 700. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Event trading offered by DraftKings Predictions, a CFTC registered introducing broker. Trading involves risk of loss. Market availability varies. Eligibility restrictions apply. $50 every 7 days via click to claim, issued in non-withdrawable prediction dollars that expire in 1 year. The offer ends on June the 28th. Terms dkng.co/predictions promo. All right. As I mentioned, I have been in Madison Square Garden on countless numbers of occasions for epic shot making and unbelievable individual moments. But it usually comes from the other team. That's the irony of what happened last night. Knick fans over the years have suffered Michael Jordan daggers over and over and over. Charles Smith missing layups at the rim against the Bulls that would have allowed the Knicks to win that game and maybe that series. A Patrick Ewing finger roll against the Pacers that bounced off the back of the rim. And I could keep going. Now, there have been iconic shots at MSG made by Knick players before. The aforementioned Patrick Ewing's putback against the Pacers to go to the NBA Finals for the first time since that 70s team had done it. John Stark's dunk against the Chicago Bulls in 93. Larry Johnson's 4-point play against the Indiana Pacers in 1999. Dante DiVincenzo's shots. You know, there have been moments that have been meaningful for Knick fans and shots that actually have been made by Knick players. But if we're honest, most of the big-time shot-making and big moments have come from the opposition, certainly when so much has been on the line. Last night was unbelievable. And, you know, watching this through the prism of the hope that at some point Jazz fans can be sitting there watching their team in the NBA Finals doing something historic and special. As, of course, the Utah Jazz have never won a championship in the history of their organization. And for the Knicks, it has been 53 years since they last won theirs. So many things had to happen last night for the Knicks to come back and win that game. It was 72-49. 72-49. In the regular season, you can open up your mind to the point where, okay, maybe you can get this done. Regular season basketball, more possessions. The refs don't call it as tight. It's more free-flowing and up and down. But it's hard to really quantify how unique last night was. Obviously, the easiest thing to say is it had never happened. Coming back from 29 points in an NBA Finals game has never happened before because, honestly, it's impossible. It feels like it's impossible because so many things have to happen. You have to get cooperation from the other team, too. There's no way the other team can even play average, decent basketball, and you can play as well as you can. You can hit your ceiling. That still is not enough to get it done. The San Antonio Spurs scored 41 points in the first quarter. They scored 40 points in the second half. This was not just about the New York Knicks playing well. Now, it was about the Knicks playing well, and Mike Brown deserves his flowers. As a Tom Thibodeau guy, I was very skeptical about the decision to fire Tom after making it to the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago and bring in Mike Brown, who does have an NBA championship, but he also was coaching a guy named LeBron, and since then, it's been a transient existence, some assistant coaching stops, ironically enough, in San Antonio. Once upon a time, Golden State gets the Sacramento job, actually wins Coach of the Year, and then everything goes sideways. I think a lot of people thought Mike would never get another opportunity, and people were surprised when the Knicks decided to replace Tom Thibodeau with Mike Brown. It's time to give this guy some credit because there were adjustments made at halftime. Namely, how about we guard them, right? I mean, San Antonio set an NBA record for three-point shots made in the first half, 14. NBA Finals record. They hit 3 in the second half. And the majority of that was about the Knicks actually deciding to try to close out on shooters and take away airspace because while I credit San Antonio for their shot making in the first half, a lot of practice jumpers, a lot of walk into open threes. Whether it was Wembanyama hitting a couple of threes, De'Aaron Fox hitting threes early, Devin Vassell hit his first 5. Dylan Harper comes in off the bench. Even Carter Bryant got in on the act. Everybody was knocking out shots in the first half. So while I knew that wasn't sustainable, if the Knicks didn't improve their rotations and their closeouts and their efforts simply on defense, San Antonio would have been able to make open shots because most NBA players can do that at a pretty high clip if they're not being affected defensively. The Knicks were so much better in the second half defensively. And yes, San Antonio made a lot of errors and rushed some shots here or there, but most of their threes in the second half were under duress and contested. Why they didn't elect to take a little bit more clock off when they had such a big lead, it's a delicate dance here because you don't want to take your foot off the gas, but at the same time, when you have a 29-point lead, you can afford to be a little bit more intentional with wasting time. You can afford to do that. And there were so many rushed threes with 17, 18 seconds left in the shot clock that I'm watching the way San Antonio is playing, and I'm watching the way the Knicks are a little bit more dialed in defensively, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, if they can start knocking down some shots in a way that they weren't in the first half, maybe they get it to within 15 to 17 at the end of the third, and then maybe, just maybe, you can do something special from there. But I didn't think they were going to be able to do that, and sure enough, after the third quarter, the Knicks were down 15, and you think, okay, well, it's still borderline impossible in a playoff game, let alone an NBA Finals game. And, of course, the officiating is getting a bunch of attention. But then you could tell Victor Wembanyama, I don't know if he was a little bit overwhelmed with the moment. The kid doesn't really seem like the type of person that gets overwhelmed by any big moment. He's been playing pro basketball for a long time. Even though he's only been in the league 3 years, he's played in the Olympics. He suffered a gold medal loss. He lost a U19 game back in the day to win a championship. He's been in big moments before, but he was disconnected in the second half and stopped being nearly as aggressive. And then you start seeing the turnovers. San Antonio didn't have any turnovers through about a quarter and a half. They had 9 of their 11 turnovers in the second half. De'Aaron Fox had 4 of them. We'll get to De'Aaron Fox in a moment. So Jalen starts waking up, okay? And he starts, he being able to do what he does to get to the free throw line. The Knicks shot 28 free throws. They made 20. San Antonio 17 of 20. So the Knicks missed 8 free throws, but Jalen started getting to the free throw line. They were pretty stubborn to basically guard him straight up and not run 2 defenders at him until the last possession, which was also a mistake. We'll get to that as well. So Jalen starts making some shots. They start to hedge a little bit off of OG Anunoby, but OG Anunoby is going to be remembered for his tip-in and his block. 7 of 9 from 3 and 4 or 5 just massive three-point shots in the second half to keep them in the area where you started to feel like, okay, maybe they can make this thing close and get a little lucky down the stretch. Early on, Karl Anthony Towns, who has the reputation as a player who picks up silly fouls, he picks up 2 fouls within like 70 seconds. Honestly, those were some rough whistles, to be fair to Cat. But Mitchell Robinson is a player who you can play here or there because he can really rebound and protect the rim. My man is in horrible shape because they had to go to the Sohan kid and the Huck Porty kid, the 2 backup centers who never play because Mitchell Robinson couldn't run up and down the floor for more than 4 or 5 trips before he was sucking gas. So the Cat thing early on probably was the main impetus to San Antonio running away from the Knicks in the first half. He stays out of foul trouble in the second half. They get some big minutes from Jose Alvarado, a New York native. Mike Brown decides to bench Mikal Bridges, who for the second straight game, like, where are you at, dude? They traded 5 first-round picks for you. It's the NBA Finals. 28 rather uninspiring minutes. Mike Brown pulls him. He goes Alvarado Brunson as 2 small guards that are good ball handlers to take a little pressure off of Jalen to let Alvarado bring the ball up occasionally so Brunson could play off ball. But Alvarado knocks down a massive 3. He gives them 16 really good minutes where he had 8 points, 3 assists, and a couple of rebounds, and he's like 5'11", okay? So a gutsy play from Mike Brown to go with those 2 in the backcourt. Former Jazzman Jordan Clarkson had 5 of the worst minutes I've seen in a long time and one of the most atrocious turnovers in a big moment, so he's on the bench. But you get Cat back in the lineup for the second half. Jalen starts to get going. Josh Hart had a pretty quintessential Josh Hart game. Didn't shoot it all that well. Only took 4 shots, but had 6 points. But gave you 8 boards, 6 assists, couple of steals. And Josh Hart was bailed out by OG Anunoby in a way that I haven't seen in a long, long time. I honestly forgot that Josh Hart missed that layup until I was rewatching some highlights later because we were all focused on what happened at the end. And what happened at the end was incredible fortune by New York with how dumb San Antonio handled it. De'Aaron Fox is the vet on this roster. He's won the clutch award that Jalen Brunson has won. He is known to be a clutch player and a guy who you want to have the ball in his hand in the biggest moments. But San Antonio is up 1, and the clock is ticking down. After Josh Hart misses his layup, Wembanyama misses a couple of free throws. Wembanyama's got to wear that too. And there's a little bit of a run out, and De'Aaron Fox gets the ball, and San Antonio is up 1 with like 7 seconds left. And for some reason, of all of the options of what you can do in that moment, the one thing you can't do is either turn it over or try a contested layup against a really good defensive player in OG Anunoby who makes the block. And then the final possession, okay? You knew that New York was going to try to find Jalen Brunson, and San Antonio did the right thing as far as Wembanyama, the best defensive player in the league right now, in the world right now, and potentially when he's done, the best defensive force we've ever seen. He gets switched on to Jalen. And, yeah, you would want Wembanyama next to the basket to disallow tip-ins, but because Wembanyama is switched on to Jalen, I knew Jalen was going to pull it from like 28 because if he tried to dribble any closer, Wembanyama would have tipped it or blocked it. So Jalen pulls from 28 with about 3.5 seconds left, and some people are like, that's a bad shot. I actually don't think that it was because with Wembanyama on you, you can't do much of anything, but then they run a second defender over to guard Jalen even though Wembanyama was on him. And because they ran the second defender into the action, there was nobody left to block out OG Anunoby, who had a free run to the rim. So Jalen short arms the three. It actually looked good. Nobody's there to block out OG Anunoby. And in an instant, history made at Madison Square Garden after the Knicks were down 72 to 49. That can't happen. That is impossible. Now, this series is far from over. And I don't know how much of this is Knick PTSD. But again, in the 3 Knick wins, it had to be like a perfect combination of atrocious San Antonio play and mistakes and some very fortunate moments for New York. An unbelievable Game 1 comeback. Game 2, Wembanyama throws it off Stephon Castle's back for the turnover. And now Game 4, De'Aaron Fox, who's supposed to be the grown-up in the locker room, does the only thing you can't do to give New York the final chance to win it. They go back to San Antonio. This is a massive contest. Obviously it is, because if the Knicks win, the series is over. But if you're San Antonio, all you have to do is convince yourself, hey, we won Game 3 at MSG, and we pissed away Game 4. We win one game in our building, and it leads to a very nervy Game 6 in New York, where if the Knicks can't get that one done, San Antonio has Game 7 in their building. It's been an epic NBA Finals, unbelievable night in New York. And I really hope Jazz fans have a chance to experience that one day because it's really, really cool. All right, we'll catch a break. We'll do more on this with Bowler coming up. But coming up on the other side, Ed Peterson will join us. We're going to talk about the Brendan Sorsby situation. And then it's Craig Bowlerjack, Ryan McGee, Spencer Hall. Busy Thursday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Looks like South Africa had a red card. Didn't see what happened. They're down to 10 men. Mexico gets their second goal. So Mexico up 2-0 on South Africa. World Cup 2026 is now underway. U.S. men's national team will be in action tomorrow. 7 o'clock Mountain Time. Fox has the coverage. So you can find the game on Fox. Paraguay will be the first opponent. Want to let you know they're coming up tonight at 10:35 on KMYU. Will be episode 15 of Talkin' Real. It is me and Tony Beltran. Tony, assistant sporting director for Real Salt Lake, in for Brian Dunseth, who is with Turner Sports. And so we'll get you ready for tomorrow's match between the U.S. men's national team and Paraguay as group play is underway. We're going to talk about the Brendan Sorsby situation. So the latest, according to Pete Thamel, is now the Attorney General of the state of Texas has sent a letter warning the Big 12 that they will face legal action from the state if the Big 12 comes down with any punishment regarding the Brendan Sorsby situation. Of course, the injunction was granted by a judge in Lubbock that will clear the way for Brendan Sorsby to play in time for the start of the Big 12 calendar. He will miss the first couple of games of the season, the non-con, which Abilene Christian and Oregon State on the road, games that Texas Tech is going to win by 1 million anyway. So the latest, the Big 12 conference presidents met today to discuss whether the league can invoke bylaw 3.6 to sanction the Red Raiders if they decide to play Sorsby, who, as I said, was declared ineligible by the NCAA for wagering on college sports, but then Judge Ken Curry from Lubbock, Texas, granted a temporary injunction to play for the Red Raiders, and the NCAA plans to appeal the ruling. But as of now, the date for that court case is in February, which is 2 weeks after the national championship game. So that's kind of where we're at as of now. Of course, we've heard from all the athletic directors. We have heard from Mark Harlan and others as it pertains to kind of their reaction to everything. And most of what I've seen has indicated that most people are actually on the side of the NCAA here, which does not happen very often. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Regardless who's under center for them, whether it's Will Hammond, their backup, or Brendan Sorsby, Texas Tech certainly has earned the benefit of the doubt as the favorite in this conference, and they remain the Vegas favorite to win the conference. They remain the favorite in the prediction market space. BYU is thought to be the second-ranked team in that space in the Big 12, and Stu Mandel, with his latest projections, actually has BYU as a top 10 team nationally, and BYU as the favorite now to win the Big 12 conference. So that's kind of where we're at as of right now. I don't really know what the pathway forward would be from the Big 12. We heard from the athletic director down at Texas Tech yesterday as he released a lengthy statement. Kirby Hocutt released a lengthy statement on his social media profile. Quote, "The situation is hard. It's new and there's no perfect answer. There's a lot of deflection going on. And, I think from a PR standpoint, it does not seem to indicate to me that Texas Tech has much of a plan in place because there's a lot of reactionary things. Maybe they are as surprised as anybody that Brendan Sorsby was able to get this injunction. As I talked about yesterday, when I saw the news that Jeffrey Kessler was hired as the attorney for Brendan Sorsby, Jeffrey Kessler is the best in the business at doing what he just did. And that is finding an angle to make sure his client is able to get what they're after. And I think one of the most unfortunate things about not just the Brendan Sorsby ruling, but the Diego Pavia ruling or the Trinidad Chambliss ruling is what is in place right now is the ability that these players have to find high-profile, highly paid attorneys. And then the attorneys have these networks, right? A lot of them know judges because a lot of judges are former attorneys themselves. Maybe they went to law school together. Maybe they, worked together back in the day at a law firm. So just find the right judge in the right district. And then who knows what the conversations are like behind the scenes. And maybe some things are promised here or there. And then go to that district and file, and you're going to get the ruling that you want. And as we've talked about with the Brendan Sorsby situation, what Jeffrey Kessler and the Brendan Sorsby team were able to convince this, unless this is a bottom line, everything that is happening behind the scenes is absolutely shady, and this is all about Texas Tech winning football games and the Texas Attorney General himself getting involved, kind of makes you wonder. Ken Paxton is his name. Sent a letter to the Big 12 Commissioner, Brett Yormark, and the Board of Governors today, notifying the league that it would be exposed to, quote, substantial liability if it takes action against Texas Tech for playing Brendan Sorsby. So now we have government officials involved in this story as well. And look, none of us really know exactly how all this went down. It certainly does not pass the smell test. I think it's safe to say that, at least for me, I don't know where you guys have landed with this, but as of right now, it just, something about this doesn't feel right. But what they've been able to convince, if we just go off face value, which without knowing what happened behind the scenes, I mean, really, what else can we do other than just go off of the filings and what's public and what we have in front of us as far as the knowledge of how this all went down? What they were successful at doing was arguing that Brendan Sorsby is an addict in need of help. And by taking away his ability to play college football, the NCAA is impeding his ability to get well. Now, as Porter talked about yesterday, and there are a couple of different think pieces have been written on this. If we are to believe that Brendan Sorsby is a gambling addict that needs to recover and get better, placing him smack dab in the middle of playing sports, the same sport that he gambled on 40 times for a team that he was playing for, Indiana, seems counter to our knowledge of what addiction is and what treatment needs to be. I mean, again, it's kind of why I want to be careful about sounding like I'm an expert in a field that I'm not, as it pertains to addiction recovery and treatment and what we need to do to help people like this. But again, it just seems really counter to what I think most people's understanding is of recovery and people that are suffering from an addiction, to place the addict right in the middle of what caused the problem in the first place. And that's why it's kind of hard to buy into this narrative that has been created by Jeffrey Kessler and Brendan Sorsby's legal team. Again, the judge bought it, which is why I granted the injunction. And again, we're just going off of face value. Maybe the judge is a Tech fan. Maybe all of this is some seedy backroom deal making between lawmakers, the AG, Jeffrey Kessler, Brendan Sorsby, and this judge. I don't know. Because again, it's hard to buy into what they're asking us to believe as it pertains to painting Brendan Sorsby as a suffering addict, when the solution that is proposed is to place the addict right back into the environment that caused the issue in the first place. That to me is kind of difficult to believe, but that's what that's what they're asking us to believe, and that's what the judge believed, and that's why Brendan Sorsby is going to be able to play college football this year, at least as of right now, and Texas Tech and the Texas Attorney General appear to be in lockstep here. And the Texas Attorney General himself sent the letter today to the Big 12 saying that you will be exposed to substantial liability if you take action against Brendan Sorsby and Texas Tech. So this is your Mark statement here. Oh, wait, no, this is more from the Attorney General. Quote, "We are aware that the Big 12 is considering invoking bylaw 3.6 of the Big 12's bylaw to sanction Texas Tech for respecting the order and continuing its support of Mr. Sorsby as a student athlete. This letter serves to notify the Big 12 that any such action would be unlawful and would expose the conference to substantial liability." So the Big 12 ADs held a conference call with Yormark on Tuesday, and Texas Tech was not a part of it. And according to Pete Thamel, in that call, the other 15 universities unanimously opposed the Red Raiders playing Sorsby this season. I did talk about this yesterday. If this was the backup quarterback at West Virginia, would it be getting the same attention? Obviously not. how much of the wailing and gnashing of teeth and pearl clutching from the other schools is about not wanting the best team in the conference to have their starting quarterback. I can't speak to that. There have been more conversations from schools about potentially boycotting playing the games against Texas Tech, namely Mike Buddy, he's the TCU athletic director, and Gene Taylor, who is the K-State athletic director. Haven't heard anything from Utah or BYU in that direction. Some other schools, Georgia and such, have indicated they're not going to schedule Texas Tech in anything. But yeah, now we have the Texas Attorney General getting involved in this mix. I'm not going to read all, this is a long letter. You guys can, go look it up yourself, because I'm not just going to simply read this letter on air, but this is more than a thinly framed threat in the direction of the Big 12 should they decide to ultimately take action against Brendan Sorsby. So, and the other angle is this. I think Dan Wetzel wrote the piece today for ESPN. This really isn't on Texas Tech. And I think it would go a long way if Texas Tech and Joey McGuire and the AD, if Kirby Hocutt and Joey McGuire took a little bit of it, and that's why I referenced the PR approach from Tech as something that just appears to be disjointed and not necessarily something that feels like they sat down and tried to plan the messaging. It would go a long, long way if Texas Tech and the AD and the coach simply just said, look, we're kind of surprised just like you guys are, but I'm a football coach. I'm an athletic director. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a judge. We had nothing to do with this legal process. And McGuire essentially said that. We had nothing to do with how this went down through the back channels in the court. We have zero knowledge of how this went down. He hired his own lawyers, and basically we're now informed that he can play for us, and so he can play for us. Right? I mean, something along the lines of that, as opposed to this deflecting and kind of confusing messaging that hasn't really landed, I think, and hasn't really done much to help Brendan Sorsby. Because, again, as we discussed with the addiction piece of this, it's really hard to know what the scale is of gambling addiction as it's compared to, as we talked about yesterday, the article that I was looking at. The article I was looking at indicated the belief in the medical community is where we're at with gambling addiction is about 30 years ago as it pertains to where we were with drugs and alcohol addiction, because they're still kind of learning about it. Sports gambling as a widespread legal hobby is still relatively new, even though sports gambling itself is not new, or gambling itself is not new at all. So we're still kind of learning about, how serious is this? How do we treat it? How do we help people get well? Where do we classify it in the grand scheme of things? There are so many things that are now classified as an addiction. All right, we're short on time here. So Ed Peterson, as I referenced, Peterson Family Therapy, joins the program. Ed, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Spence.
Good. All right. So just real quick, we only have a few minutes, but just for our listeners, Ed you're a specialist in the addiction field. Ed, how would you characterize what you do?
Yeah, I mean, the addiction field is simple yet very hard in that we're talking about people who develop a behavior or taking a substance, usually where they can't stop, they may want to stop, they experience cravings, and it basically is messing up their lives, and they either don't want to stop or they can't stop.
All right, so when it comes to gambling, of course, the big story in college football right now is Brendan Sorsby, who was the number one ranked recruit in the transfer portal, is a quarterback who played at Cincinnati, and he signed with Texas Tech for a reported $5 million fee of NIL money. And then, of course, he'll get paid by the school. But he was found to have been gambling for a number of different years. As an underage person, was using other people's sports book accounts, which is actually a federal crime. He placed 40 bets on his own team, Indiana, to the tune of about $90,000. Anyway, after the reporting came out, I think most everybody, it was kind of unanimous that this kid was never going to play college football again. But his attorney, Jeffrey Kessler, has successfully argued that as a gambling addict, the NCAA, if they take away his ability to play college football, they'll take away his support as somebody who needs to get well. Help us understand, when you treat people that find themselves in a bad spot gambling addicts, help us understand how that relates to other addictions that we're more familiar with, namely drugs and alcohol and such.
Well, here's the tricky part is that gambling is one of those addictions that can, one, take people out in literally hours. Now, it sounds like that is not the case with this guy in that he had a pattern over years. But there's always this what I would call it a conundrum whereby when you're trying someone with a gambling addiction, it is very similar to drugs and alcohol and other things. However, a big part of treating any addict is to help them understand that they have to be accountable for their actions. Because if they're not, what happens is people get bailed out, and unfortunately, people often do not their addiction because someone, a dad or a mom or a school or a attorney is basically saying because of this addiction, this person shouldn't have to deal with the consequences. I mean, Pete Rose got kicked out of the major leagues. And so my concern, I mean, I think that it's valid that he needs help, and it's wonderful if he goes into recovery and takes it seriously. It's just that if they find a way to take away these consequences, no matter how serious he may be about his recovery, it's a slippery slope because deep down he's going to feel like he got bailed out. And the next time that he's thinking about gambling, it may not be on his team. It may be in a casino, whatever it is. His brain will have learned the lesson that he doesn't have to be accountable because people came in and bailed him out.
All right, let me ask you this, because, this kid has now become the face of an issue that a lot of certainly young men have fallen victim to because of the widespread, not just legalities, but now how accessible it is to get sportsbook apps on your phone. And of course, he's been paying millions of dollars to be playing college football. And again, I'm just not educated enough on this type of dynamic, but isn't putting him back in the middle of college football, like playing college football, like you wouldn't make an alcoholic a rep for Jack Daniels? Like you're putting him right back in the middle of the setting that got him sideways in the first place. Does that make sense? It doesn't seem like a great idea.
Yeah, it does make sense. And you see, what this will do is, it will set an example for other people that have a problem, and especially for their families. And, I think it's absolutely insane and immoral, FanDuels and what the professional sports and ESPN are doing. I think they're creating a whole generation of potential gambling addicts. But again, if people are not responsible for what they do, how do they learn? I mean, if it turned out that, you could get off for a DUI, or someone could, does something on methamphetamine and breaks the law, and someone comes in and says, oh, it's okay. We have to have compassion and we have to get them treatment. Now, I'm all for the compassion and all for the treatment. But again, if people aren't held accountable, then I just think it's a slippery slope. And I just don't think it's moral.
As it pertains to your experience in treating gambling addicts, and I don't want to just completely compare it to other recovery processes. I just am more familiar with other areas of addiction than I am with gambling. What have you seen as far as treatment/recovery that does allow for getting better, long-term recovery that lasts? What does that look like?
Right. Yeah, what it looks like is a similar situation with other addictions. My experience is there has to be a 2-year plan, and that usually involves some sort of rehab, intense therapy. Group therapy is probably the most powerful, because what they may not take in from an individual therapist, they very often will listen to a peer. But it is a long process because it is so available, and it's the kind of thing where it is, like I said, a slippery slope. But we treat it in the same way. We treat it as a brain disease that has led people to be willing to basically hurt the people that they love the most and put everything, including their career, at risk. I mean, that is one of the signs of insanity, but it also is a disease. And so we have to help people with that, but we won't help them if they don't have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's what we've been discussing. I don't know of an addict who gets well without suffering some sort of consequence based off of decisions that you've made while using. And no matter what went into play that led you to make the bad decision, you made the bad decision. And the consequence piece is one of the most vital parts of getting well, right? Getting through the consequences that you have to suffer as a result of the choices you made.
That is correct. And that's why I think this is just such a difficult and potentially dangerous precedent to have, because think about all these young kids who may be 10 grand in the hole. They may be, 40,000, and they may make that phone call to their dad or their mom and say, listen, I'm a gambling addict, and, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I need your help, and please bail me out, and I promise I will never do this again. Well, the problem is, until they get real treatment, they can't make that promise. And again, they're going to hear about this, and this guy may just slide through, and, his life may not really be hurt at all, and these consequences go away. And I don't know. It's just it's a very difficult thing, and I think the odds are not good for him going forward in his life.
Hey, before I say you lose, if we do have any listeners that feel like they're in a bad spot with whatever it is, a substance, gambling, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I would first ask them to start out and get some help. See a therapist who is who is experienced in this, and then it's about assessing where someone is. And I believe in the lowest level of care first. If someone can see a therapist once or twice a week, that is great. If they can't, then you look at intensive outpatients. And if they really can't, they go to a residential rehab. But it's basically taking this seriously. And the leverage comes usually from the family, because very often the addict, if he or she is choosing what they're going to do, are going to choose the easier way. And a lot of times that's why interventions work, is that families come in and they say, if you won't do this, if you won't do what is required, we're not going to support you.
Hey, Ed, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. We'll set you loose. Let's get out and golf soon, okay?
All right, Spence, thanks.
Hey, Ed Peterson, addiction specialist, longtime family therapist, and yeah, just trying to get some insight on exactly what this is. Just not educated on it very much at all. But we'll catch a break. And coming up next, we'll bring in Bowler. We'll talk about Bowler's thoughts on a historic night at MSG, and we're less than 2 weeks away from the NBA draft, so we'll talk some Jazz basketball as well. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Want to let you know that the Ron McBride Foundation presents The Head and the Heart Saturday, August 22nd at the Utah State Fair Park. Get your tickets and all the info at ESPN700sports.com. Text HEART to 33986 for your chance to score a pair of tickets right now. More next with Bowler on ESPN 700. For the first time in the history of the World Cup, we saw 3 red cards in the opening match. Mexico beat South Africa 2-0 to start off their group play. The U.S. men's national team will begin their World Cup journey tomorrow at 7 o'clock Mountain Time on Fox against Paraguay. Our next guest, you know what, Buller? I'll save the soccer questions for Monson next time he's on, but Craig Bowlerjack joins the program on a Thursday. How are you, sir?
I'm well. You know, Gordo, man, soccer extraordinaire. I mean, there's nothing you really have never been able to slip by much around Gordo and his knowledge of soccer. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's very impressive for a man who's literally never watched a match to be as plugged in as he is. How you doing, man? How are things with you?
I'm good. Excited. 12 days in counting to draft night. Last night, you and I exchanged a text or two. I was absolutely. I just don't have a word. You can overplay it, impossible, epic, but you had to watch it. I can't imagine being there last night to watch such a huge, history-making night in the NBA. 29 down, you come back and win by 1. And I tell you, that crowd, I mean, you talk about revved up. That place was amazing. Just so the noise I heard through my TV, it was just epic.
It was 72-49, Craig. Like, give me a break. No shot.
And I said, I left the room, came back, went out and sat around for a while, came back and, okay, a little pushback, 29 to 15. I said, maybe, we know the league. You can make another run back, but I just don't see the Spurs letting this one go. But I tell you, the tip in by Anunoby, I don't know where it came from. The hand was just, I think Cat called it the hand of God, and it was up there and tapped it in. Unbelievable comeback. And, don't know what the locker room was like in San Antonio, but you talk about tearing your heart out. That would be the definition of losing a 29-point lead on the road, mind you, after dominating and then watching it just slip away really all in the second half, little by little, Spence. But then that fourth quarter, the energy of the crowd, I thought, played into it as well. And you could just say, something special's happening, and it actually did.
Yeah, I mean, look, De'Aaron Fox is supposed to be the grown-up in that locker room, and I have no idea. There are actually some people surmising that he forgot they were ahead 1 because he gets the ball. He gets the ball on a run out. They're up 106-105. There's less than 10 seconds left. The only thing you can't do is what he did to try to take a contested layup against a really good defensive player. Like, pull the ball out, either get fouled, waste a little bit more time. I cannot wrap my mind around that decision, but OG Anunoby in about 5 seconds of basketball time and about 2 minutes of real time with a block on one end, and then, as you referenced, the tip-in that will make him a legend in New York as long as he lives.
Yep. Yes. He will walk on, let's just say, water for a long time. He will be and is a Knick legend. In just those, in a matter, he was having a nice series and he had a nice game overall. But that play will be replayed and replayed throughout NBA lore history from now until time ends. And it was a game that had so many moments. And again, I felt like, wow, San Antonio, you're young, but you're so talented. Stephon Castle really impresses me. Wemby, there are moments. Spence, I don't know what you see. There are moments of greatness and then some inconsistencies. But I just thought, again, last night, body language kind of told me, man, these guys are now in the doubting mode. And, you kind of watch that. And, and the Knicks never really seemed to have a head down like we're done. There was always a sense that they could do this. And, listening to Anunoby's post-game comments and what Kat said too was, you just got to take it little by little. And we know the NBA. We know, and Spence, you know it, I know it. It is a game of runs, and home court does have its advantages, and I think it all played out last night.
Yeah, it certainly did. As much as that was about New York playing much better in the second half, that's a young team that still has to learn what it's like in those moments to play with a lead. Because when you have that type of lead, it's an interesting balance, Bowler, as you know, because you don't want to take your foot off the gas to allow the team to come back, but you have such a cushion that the clock is your friend. And so many early shot clock forced 3-point shots in the second half, jacking up 3-point shots that are contested with 18, 19 seconds left on the shot clock. In that moment, and Mitch Johnson's a young coach. I think you got to pull your guys in and say, look, let's run some plays here. Let's run some concepts and some sets. Let's make sure there's 4, 5, 6 seconds left on the clock, and then we can take the shot. Let's bleed this thing out because we have our foot on the throat. All we have to do is press down, and we got this thing, and we're going back home to win it, potentially take the series lead.
Yeah, it's a great point. I thought the youth did shine through, even with the coaching last night. I think I read this morning multiple shots in the second half were 21 to 20 seconds still left on the shot clock. So, yes, they did not burn clock. They did not do themselves favors. They rushed. They missed. New York got the rebounds and then pushed themselves and worked the ball until they had a shot, or at least – and then they hit a couple to three really just crucial 3-point shots down the stretch. And then, of course, the quick heave by Brunson, and all of a sudden OG out of nowhere, just the paw just kind of appeared, and just to be able to softly put it back in is just beyond me. And then you could tell, just listen to the crowd and Bream and Jefferson and Tim, how they called that. I thought it was just an epic moment. Those are the games that you just, hope one day you can get a chance to be a part of. And that was special. And the NBA, I'm sure, I'm not sure how the ratings will turn out. I'm sure the last 12, 15 minutes of that game will be out of sight in ratings, but I don't think they really drew much first half versus, second half, especially the fourth quarter. But still, an incredible moment in jazz one day, I hope, NBA history. It was something.
And we'll get to the Jazz stuff in just a moment, but 19-point lead after the first quarter. That's never happened in the NBA Finals. 27-point lead at halftime. Again, it was 72-49. It's so ridiculous. Yeah. But here's the thing, Bowler. One of the things that impresses me most about Wembanyama is that he is measured. He doesn't get rattled. He was bad in the second half. He was 3 of 14 in the second half. After the game, he said the things that you would expect him to say. And I believe they go back to San Antonio, and I actually think they win this game. I mean, there's going to be a lot of Knick PTSD in me that doesn't think the Knicks are going to win this series. If San Antonio goes back home and wins Game 5, and we go back to MSG for a Game 6, that's a nervy Game 6 for the Knicks, because you do not want to play Game 7 back in their building.
No, you do not. And you make a great point. Look, on paper, it sounds impossible. 3-1, then you have to win 3 straight if you're San Antonio to claim the title. And New York, they have to feel really fortunate that they're actually going to San Antonio with a 2-game lead. But you're right, the focus has to continue. Wemby, as young as he is, still has that focused, and I'm glad he takes the responsibilities, and he understands who he is. He's a cool cat, Spence. He really is. At the free throw line, he's focused. Bigs usually have troubles making, free throws alone, crucial free throws. And again, you have to be careful with this team. San Antonio's good, talented, but I think what you saw again last night was veterans who kind of taught the younger guys what it's like in pressure time to actually win a playoff game, a finals playoff game, mind you. Now, the Knicks haven't been there for eons, but this team is veterans, are veteran players who've been in some pretty tough moments, and the Spurs are learning that right now. And I thought that was another part of the equation in the New York win.
Yeah, and as you know, the two teams that have colored my basketball life have been the Jazz and the Knicks, which has led me to so much suffering over the years, tremendous amount of suffering over the years. And look, like you, I'm watching that game last night. I'm like, man, I want Jazz fans to experience what it's like to watch their teams, their team play in the NBA Finals. And, you remember and, called some games for the Jazz when the stakes were at the highest. So what is it like? What's the atmosphere like when you're calling an NBA Finals game? The interesting thing is, Breen's a New Yorker. He grew up, in New York. He's a Knick fan, but he does such a masterful job of nobody. I don't think anybody would know that if they just turned on the game. But for Jazz fans that are hoping to experience this, hopefully it's not 53 years in between like it is for Knick fans, but it has been a long, long time. What kind of context can you provide about what a Jazz in the NBA Finals experience would be like for this fan base?
Oh, man, it would just, again, another generation, Spence. The generation of the 97, 98 runs now tell their kids who are young adults who probably have children of their own what grandpa, grandma, have to say about those days. I mean, just think about it. Carl and John, my goodness, drafted in 83, Big T 83, Stockton 84, Carl 85. And those were really the early foundation pieces for this franchise. But it took another, from 84 to 93, you're talking, 14 years before, 13, 14 years before they got a chance to really play on the big stage against Jordan, Pippen, and the Bulls. And, for it to happen and repeat itself, to run itself back, awesome. The team has put themselves in a position, Spence, to try to be in that wheelhouse again. It's a tough Western Conference. Wemby and the guys aren't going anywhere. OKC, I guarantee you, will be back with some minor, fixes here and there. But the Jazz want to be a part of the elite top 3, top 4 teams in the West, and they want a larger window. And that's why this pick coming up on the 23rd looms so large in the decision by Austin, Danny, Justin, and Ryan and Ashley, just to make it right, to get it right, because you hope that this team will be around for a while. Will they have to make some tweaks? Absolutely. Every team does year in, year out, but they also have to balance, Spence, what the Smiths want to pay, right? That's what's going down in Oklahoma City. How do you make it work? And that's a real test. But man, for it to happen again, calling playoff games, covering those games in 97 and 98, the old people may remember Show Me the Title with Antoine, Big Dog Carr, Antoine Carr. Were special. The city was lit. They were on fire. I can't even replicate what that's like until you live it again. And New Yorkers are feeling that exact thing. Central Park last night, the shots they take. I mean, they're all in, and it really brings a city. You don't have a problem. You don't have a care, by the way, when your team is in a position like that. And I can't imagine what New York was like today, and what they're anticipating in Game 5 in San Antonio. But boy, I'm with you. I sure hope we get to experience that again sooner than later, because it solidifies a city, a state, a region. And I know that sounds crazy, but fandom is a real word, and it does echo through a state, a city, and beyond. And that's why the Jazz fans have continued to be so doggone tuned in. I mean, they've been through 3 years of hell at times. Spent 17 wins a year ago, 22 this year, and now maybe you're going to start reaping the benefits of putting some W's back in the win column. It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
So I just have to wonder, as it pertains to the draft, what the Jazz have in mind as they watch both San Antonio and Oklahoma City. I mean, let's just go down the list for a second here. Julian Champagnie is 24 years old. Dylan Harper is 20 years old, which I can't. That kid is just a stud. Okay, Devin Vassell is 25. Victor Wembanyama, of course, is 22. Stephon Castle is 21. I mean, the bulk. Carter Bryant is 20. I mean, that kid got in the game and hit a 3 last night. Keldon Johnson, 6th man of the year, is 26. The bulk of their team is the average age is about 23, 24 years old. Oklahoma City will have some financial decisions to make, but if they're able to kind of traverse the space, and Sam Presti is as good as anyone in this ecosystem, they're going to be tough to deal with for another 3 to 5 years at least. So I just have to wonder, if the Jazz are looking at these two teams and maybe starting their realistic clock with the number 2 pick, Ace being young, Keontae being young, what does that mean for the future of Lauri Markkanen, who's going to turn 29 this year? I don't know. But as we approach draft night, less than 2 weeks away now, there's more than a few pieces of intel that indicate the Jazz really like Cameron Boozer. And I think everybody likes Cameron Boozer. I'm of the mindset that whoever Washington doesn't take out of DeBonce and Peterson, you just go with whoever that is. But are you hearing anything about the Boozer stuff, and what sort of insight can you give us as we're less than 2 weeks away from the draft?
Well, I'm like you. You're hearing Cam Boozer's name a lot more around the NBA when you read constantly the projected, right, draft night picks. And Cam Boozer's name, who, was and is the reigning college player of the year, and can do a lot of good things, Spence. He runs faster than people thought. Duke kind of plays more slow, methodical, half-court play at times, but still, he even talked about the other day just being in the Duke brand of just how well you're coached and what they expect and how you are taught professionalism from the very get-go. That tells me a lot. Plus, he grew up, right, in an NBA family with Carlos, so this is nothing new to him. The pressure of playing says a lot. I'm sure he did marvelous in the interview. But, yeah, Cam special. DeBonce special. Peterson, incredibly talented, but yet still some unknowns. So, again, the first domino falls, and then the Jazz – for the first time since Darryl Griffith in 1980, Spence, put that in perspective. That's crazy that the Jazz then all of a sudden, boom, get the pick. And, Washington's decision off the top will then give the Jazz the open door on what to do. And I think, again, there are 4 really good athletes out of the gate and 4 game changers, 4 franchise players, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see what direction they go, what I think that the Spurs have built and what OKC has and what Boston has, and they still may have to tweak that too in Boston, but it's depth. And that's what the Jazz, this pick will give them even more so, more depth at multiple positions, but maybe heavy on the line, the front line, right? If they go guard, then you're guard heavy too. But you're going to have to build that whole mindset that your position is you've got to work to earn those minutes. And I think that's really important. Will's made that comment multiple times. It's not easy to make a roster, and it's not easy to stay on a roster in the NBA. So I hope that's going to come into play in camp. But again, we still have to have a pick on the 23rd before that's even discussed. But I think Will Hardy, Spence, will have multiple options in lineups and player personnel, with something he's not had in what is soon to be his 5th year in the league.
Are you one who believes the dynamic of a Carlos Boozer working for the Jazz and a Cameron Boozer being familiar with the Jazz and a A.J. DeBonce playing for Brigham Young and being familiar with Ryan Smith, are you one who believes that matters at all during this decision-making process?
That's a great question. I would say in the business sense it should not, but in reality I think it has to, because you're looking at what Carlos knows the Jazz were and who they are now, and AJ obviously familiar in Provo with the Jazz organization. And let's put it this way, Spence, probably transition from college to the NBA you think would be simpler, right? A little bit more like, hey, I'm more comfortable here. I know what I'm getting into, unlike what Peterson would have to make his adjustments. So even though you have to make, Spence, the toughest decision since it's Griff in 80, if you're looking at, picks, tops, I mean, the Jazz have had 3s and 5s and, ace last year, but you're still looking at potentially a franchise-changing selection, and you can't let the outside noise impact that decision, even though it may be a little more comfortable knowing that those 2 players are much more familiar with the franchise. I mean, having your dad work for the franchise is outrageous enough, But to have AJ, who is 40 miles, south of Salt Lake, and knows what the score is in the state of Utah, makes it like, okay, those are easy decisions. But I think you're working with 2 professionals, 3 professionals, in Austin, Danny, and Justin. They've got to try to, they've got to screen that out, because the decision looms so large on what's best for the franchise.
All right, before I set you loose, the other angle here that just has to be discussed, and I'm not doing the whole position versus best player, because I don't think the Jazz are good enough to go position heavy. I think they should just take whoever they think is the best player. But I think it has to be brought up that if they bring Walker Kessler back, which I think they're going to do, that front court seems to be pretty solidified. And I need to underscore something, because I've heard some people talking about this around the marketplace. And I understand if you never watched Jaren Jackson Jr. play, he's not a center. He doesn't want to play center. He's a good rim protector, but he's not a pivot, okay? He's not a 5.
Right.
So I believe they made the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade in anticipation of him playing next to Walker, not replacing Walker. So Walker, when he's been healthy, has shown that he's a very good player, and he's going to be your starting center if you bring him back. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4 and Larry Markkinen at the 3. And I know Will doesn't love positions. He wants positionless basketball. But I just think it's safe to say that even if you think it's close between Darren and Cameron, Darren is the guy that fits it just better with the roster than Cameron Boozer does. I mean, just give me your thoughts on that.
No, that's, what, you break it down that way, sure. I mean, and if he is available, he'll be difficult not to take. And your point is, and I think it's a good one, is that do you draft, quote, the position you think would help, or the best athlete? And every GM I've talked to say, we want to take the best player available. And then you have to wonder, okay, in their mind, and again, we're guessing, I always have fun by saying it's above my pay grade, and it is. I mean, they're in a room with every data point you can think of, every stat, but then you have to also put the personality and the work ethic and those kind of the ones that you just have to say the human factor, right? So what fits our team, I think, comes into play. But also, Spence, I tell you, they always take, the Dennis Lindsays, the Kevin O'Connors, the Scotty Ladens will always say, if we do pick the best athlete, we'll worry later about what to do with our roster when it comes to depth, because what that does is give them options. It also gives them potential trade ability down the road to move a player for more assets or draft picks. So I think all those things will come into play on draft night on the final decision. I really do. I think they're going to try to just block out the noise and make the best decision for the Utah Jazz, because this one's big. And we can't play that down. It's number 2. And it's going to be a decision that will open what Ryan wants is not a 2 or 3 year window. It's a 7 to 10 year opportunity for the Jazz with this young core with scattered veterans to really make a mark in a very short period of time, mind you. They've suffered and let these young guys experience what it's like to lose and what it takes to win. And that's the next step, is taking it to the next level. And I'm excited to see what they do. You know what? You can't predict it, Spence. Something weird could happen at 1. Washington could trade it. Someone could jump in with multiple picks and opportunities for the Wizards to grow back quicker. That first pick, man, I don't know where it's going, but it may be a surprise. It may not. And then the Jazz, with up on their big board, I'm sure they've got 5 decisions. Like, if that happens, we go here. If that happens, we do this. I'm sure they've done their due diligence, and it may be easy for them too, Spence. It may not be as complicated as maybe we think.
All right, Bowler, we'll set you loose, man. I appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll chat soon.
All right, pal. You too.
All right. Craig Bolerjack, TV voice of the Utah Jazz, stops by today courtesy of our friends at You Went to Golf. You can celebrate Father's Day this year. You Went to Golf. Unleash Dad's swing with the all-new Titleist GTS drivers. Find the perfect GTS driver for Dad to gain superior distance, accuracy, and ball speed. You Went to Golf by Worldwide Golf. Get there. The world of the PGA Tour is up in Canada for the RBC Canadian Open, where Sahith Theegala and Emilio Grillo have the lead at 6 under par. But Tony Finau is tied for third, 5 under par with Sam Ryder and Bryce Garnett. So good for Tony. All right, we'll catch a break. Some college football coming up with Ryan McGee, one of our favorites. Keep it here on ESPN 700. The Brendan Sorsby storyline continues to unfold. The latest is now the Attorney General of the state of Texas is involved, sending the Big 12 a letter today threatening some legal action if the Big 12 decides to come down with their own sanctions on Brendan Sorsby and Texas Tech. Let's do some college football now with one of our favorites. It's been a while, but Ryan McGee, our guy from ESPN, joins the program on a Thursday. Hello, Ryan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm in high College World Series prep mode. I don't go down. I won't go out to Omaha till Wednesday for the Final Four, but we're in heavy pre-production as the games get. The first pitch is lunchtime on Friday, so I'm ready to get on with it.
You're a busy guy, aren't you? How many different assignments are you juggling currently?
A lot. But, I've learned a long time ago, if I say no, someone else is going to say yes. And so, but it's also, it's funny because the knock on me at work is I don't ever say no to anything. But what am I going to say no to? Like everything they come to me with is like kind of cool. So no, but Omaha, I mean, for folks that have never been there, man, it's just, I love the sporting events that are mostly tied to the city where they are. We love the Masters in Augusta, and I love the Indianapolis 500. Like, you can't imagine Omaha without the College World Series and vice versa. So I'm always excited to get on the plane and go out there.
All right. Since it's been a minute since you and I have been able to catch up, I do want to talk about some storylines that have been pretty massive here in Salt Lake City. And Ryan, I don't know if you've heard, but Kyle Whittingham lives in Ann Arbor now. I don't know. So what'd you make of that whole thing?
Listen, my man crush on Kyle Whittingham is well documented. I've written about it multiple times. I wrote a whole essay about it for Game Day. I just love that guy, but it's weird. I mean, whenever you see, it's like when you saw Willie Mays playing for the Mets. It's like it just didn't. When you see it, it doesn't make any sense. But I'm excited for him, and I think that he is the guy that Michigan needs because they need a hard reset. And they need someone who's no nonsense, and they need someone who's going to come in there and just kind of reset everything like, all right, this is how you win. This is how you're supposed to do things. And, nobody operates like that better than Kyle Whittingham does. But, yeah, I can't imagine what it's like for you guys because for me, with no real attachment to the Utes other than I just love covering games there, it's just weird looking. But I am happy for him.
Yeah, it was interesting with the way it all went down because, the initial sentiment around the market was that Witt did not want to step down and retire. And then we started hearing rumors that it wasn't just that. He actually asked for a contract extension. And Morgan Scally, who we all believe in and think it's the time for him to do his thing, was he getting antsy behind the scenes as the coach in waiting? And then with some records requests and some documents that were released, it turns out that Witt did ask for an extension, asked for a raise. And there was this sentiment that there were a lot of money people and folks in the administration that were ready for Morgan. But I don't know that anybody believed that this guy was going to get that job. Like, as I often said, I wonder what Mark Harlan's reaction was when the alert came up on his phone where he said, wait, Witt got what job? Because then what happened, Ryan, is he took 6 coaches with him. He took 5 really good players with him, grabbed Jay Hill from BYU, and suddenly Utah was paying a $13 million buyout to the new coach of Michigan who came and took a bunch of coaches and players. It was a really bizarre month of sports news cycle out here.
Yeah, and it's just and listen, those breakups never go well, right? In a perfect world, let's say they win the Big 12 and play in the playoff, and he rides off into the sunset. But it never goes that way, ever. And I lived through this 100 years ago when I was a student at Tennessee, and we had Johnny Majors, who was a legend and should have won the Heisman for Tennessee in 1956, and came back and had all the success. And the same thing. People were like, well, if we let him hang around too long, are we going to run off the guy that we think should be the next head coach, Philip Fulmer? And then there was kind of a coup d'etat, and same thing. We all filed, a public record request, and a lot of truth came out, and it just never ends great. And that's why when a Nick Saban just says, you know what, I'm out, and he's done, you kind of tip your cap because it just really doesn't ever go that way anywhere.
So when it comes to the Morgan Scalley era now that has begun, I don't know how well you know Morgan, but of course, coach and waiting for a number of years and the defensive coordinator under Kyle for a long, long time. He played at Utah. He grew up in the shadows of Rice-Eccles Stadium. I mean, if there is a Utah man, it is Morgan Scalley. I wonder what you make of now what's going to be a new era coming up this year for Utah football.
No, and I think that there are certain jobs that need to have people in those jobs that understand what that job is, and he does. And I was out there years ago, and I wrote a story about Whit, and I sat in his office all day, and Morgan came in there a couple times, taking care. He clearly, it was very obvious, who the number 2 guy was, and so I think about that conversation with Whit, and him getting almost emotional, just talking about how much he loved Salt Lake City and how much he loved just looking out the window. And I always tell a story about him, like, before dinner tonight, do I ski or do I ride my bike? And Morgan, he loves that city and he loves that school, and you know it when you talk to him. So there's just certain jobs that I think no matter how much the landscape of college football changes, there's just certain jobs that are just always unique. And you have to understand the culture and understand how you have to go about your business there, and he 100% understands that because he's literally lived it since the day he was born. So I think it's great. I always worry about this head coach and waiting deals because I remember writing about that years ago, and it was, Jimbo Fisher was behind Bobby Bowden, and I remember Will Muschamp was behind Mac Brown, and it created tension there that they didn't anticipate. And not necessarily with the coaches, but with the people that you're talking about, the people that write the checks and the people that ultimately, want their alma mater to succeed. So I hope that it works out for them because there's nothing I love more than guys who love their school and love their city so much. I want them to go back there and succeed because those are my favorite stories.
So, of course, both BYU and Utah in the Big 12 Conference, and the big storyline in the Big 12 Conference and all of college football has been Brennan Sorsby receiving the injunction from a judge in Lubbock to actually play football this year in time for the Big 12 opener. And look, Ryan, you know the deal. He hires Jeffrey Kessler, and you're like, all right, well, if there's anybody that can find a way to make this happen, it probably is that guy. And it's a layered conversation, right? Because what Jeffrey Kessler and his legal team was able to convince this judge is that Brennan Sorsby is an addict in need of support. We had an addiction specialist on the show to try to help us understand what the treatment is like for someone who finds themselves sideways with gambling. And certainly there's a conversation about the disservice that society is currently doing young people by putting, sportsbook apps on their phone and giving them such easy access to the ability to place bets. And oh, by the way, the kid's a millionaire now too. So, look, I'm trying to be sensitive to all sides of it, but my understanding as far as historical precedent with this dynamic in sport is that it is simply not allowed. So I just kind of want to kick the tires with you and what your thoughts are on where we find ourselves now.
Well, I want to say this. I like Brennan. I spent the day with him last fall when they were undefeated and had a chance to crash the playoff, and for game day. I went to Cincinnati and spent the day with him. His parents live in Knoxville, where I went to school. He's a good guy. But, the fact that I spent that day with him and Coach Satterfield of Cincinnati, who I've known forever, the fact that no one knew, right, that's the sign of an addict who's learned how to live with this. And I'm glad you had that expert on because I've talked to a lot of these experts too. And I don't think there's a lot of families, no matter what type of addiction it is, that haven't been touched by addiction. Certainly my family has multiple times. And so, first of all, I hope he's getting the help that he needs. But listen, in this era and this age where the rules are always fuzzy, right? And you never quite know exactly what's enforceable and what's not. The only rule that everyone agreed on, no matter whether you're a professional athlete, a college athlete, no matter if you're a volleyball player, a golfer, or a football player, and as long as I have been going into locker rooms, and that's since I was 3 years old, that's half a century, I have been seeing those posters on the walls in every clubhouse. And the only rule that you just absolutely 100% can't violate is gambling. And I understand that you're exactly right. The world is different now. And, listen, at ESPN, we have ESPN Bet. But at the end of the day, the only rule you couldn't violate was that one. and you couldn't violate it when the guys weren't making money. And now you certainly can't violate it while you are making money. And what I don't want to hear from is I don't want to hear from the people who are like, well, he's just a college kid, and that's what college kids do. He's not just a college kid. He's a college kid that's making $5 million a year. And at Cincinnati, he was a college kid that was making $900,000 a year. And, when I was in school, the quarterback, Allen Houston, was not a regular college student. Great guy, but he just wasn't. These athletes in these highest level sports and the highest profile, they're not regular college students. And so they have to live by a different code. That's just how it is. If you don't want to be famous and you don't want to be the starting quarterback, you don't have to follow the rules. But that's the part of it that frustrates me. I think maybe the good news out of all of this is that, there's nothing unites people more than a common enemy, right? And everyone across the board that doesn't live in Lubbock, Texas, thinks this is terrible. And so maybe this is the tipping point to fix a lot of other things. But it was the only rule you weren't supposed to break. And he broke it, and he broke it over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm glad that he's getting the help. I hope that he's actually getting the help, and they're not just telling us that he is. But I don't think there's any wiggle room on this at all. And everyone seems to agree with me except for a judge in Texas.
The other element here that I find just kind of interesting to discuss, again, not a doctor, not a specialist in addiction. I have experience with it. It sounds like you do too. I think most everybody does, whether it's personal experience or friends or family members. You wouldn't make an alcoholic a Jack Daniels rep, okay? So if you're asking us to believe this situation, and I try to approach it with empathy and belief that people are redeemable, it doesn't seem all that conducive to recovery to put a sports gambling addict right in the epicenter of sports where he was when the issues first plagued him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But we're living through the looking glass on this thing, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's upside down. It's like Stranger Things, because the entire argument that and I dealt with Jeffrey Kessler a lot last year with this NASCAR antitrust suit. And he wasn't very nice to me, but he's very good at what he does. and what for Jeffrey Kessler, their entire argument was that this was going to irreparably harm his future, in the industry that he chose. Yeah, that's called consequence. That's called the price you have to pay if you don't follow the rules. And we live in this world where everybody complains all the time about this generation, man. They don't believe in consequence, and their parents don't really slap them on the hand and tell them they can't do stuff. And then the other part is participation trophies. And now what are we doing? We're fighting over putting in as mmany teams as possible in the college football playoff postseason, and we're not holding a kid accountable for, in the eyes of a lot of people, the most egregious thing. When your defense is, well, we let guys play that have gotten DUIs and broken the law. If that's your defense, that's not a good defense, because that's not consequence for your actions. And the reality is, I think Brendan could go play at the NFL level and be fine, and that's what he needs to do, because the chaos he has created now, and will continue to create, and you guys will live it every single week because you live in that conference. It's not fair that the rest of us have to deal with this, because he, is worried that it's going to affect his future, because he put us in this situation.
Yeah, well said. Moving off of this topic specifically, but staying in the Big 12 footprint, most people believe that, and look, we got to be honest here. Texas Tech has earned the right to say we run this league. Okay, so if Brigham Young was the second best team a year ago, Texas Tech stomped them twice. And, Utah actually played them really, really well, but that doesn't matter because Tech ultimately won. Will Hammond actually stepped in and played some really good football under center for Texas Tech last year here in Salt Lake. But how do you see the conference, just generally speaking, tiered out? The teams that you think can actually win the thing this year?
Well, I mean, again, before we knew what we knew about him, I'm a Brendan Sorsby guy. It was the absolute get of the offseason. And so to me, I mean, if he's playing, if the only 2 games he ends up missing are those 2 games at the start of their schedule, which were basically buys anyway, then I think they're the team to beat. you know this, BYU always fascinates me because it always feels like the years that we go in going, well, here they come, they disappoint us a little bit. And then the years when we think they're going to be pretty good, they end up really good. And so I am totally fascinated by the Cougars because I think that they have the potential to make a lot of noise. And you know, what I love about that conference is, you know this, you can scramble up and down that ladder a lot. You know, it's hard to do that in some other conferences, but I think they could be in a position to certainly to get a lot of people's attention by the time we get to October.
You know, what I find interesting currently, the landscape of this conference is, you know, Utah striking a private equity deal with Ocho Capital, which still has not been finalized. We're still waiting for the details there. Really, Ryan, the one team in the Big 12 that might be able to keep up with Cody Campbell and Texas Tech is Brigham Young because of their deep pockets and, you know, a lot of very rich LDS people across not just the country, but the world loves BYU, and they've got this international footprint. But when it comes to the new reality of dealing with the economics of how to keep up, you know, does it feel like Tech is kind of on their own stratosphere? Do you think BYU and maybe Utah with this private equity deal can actually exist with the oil money down in Lubbock?
Yeah, and I don't think that people – like I think what we all learned with Indiana – is that I don't think people understood truthfully how large that Indiana alumni base was
mm-hmm.
and how successful. That's what, to me, that's what the BYU base has always been. Like I don't think that I think that people have always underestimated the size and the depth of the BYU alumni base. And if you get those people, you know, who literally live in every corner of the world, if you get them to get behind this the way that Indiana has. Indiana had never backed football ever. And now I got off the plane in Indianapolis for the 500 a few weeks ago, and the Indianapolis airport is covered up with Indiana football. Everywhere you go, it's all Indiana football. And when you go to Chicago, all you see everywhere is Indiana football. And it's because that alumni base is so big. So, I reluctantly, I don't want to call BYU a sleeping giant because they're way too good at football and have been for 50 years to call them a sleeping giant. But I think that fan base financially has the potential to do what we just saw the Indiana fan base do. And, you know, you got one or two Mark Cubans in there, but the reality is it's the people that are writing the checks that are much smaller than his. But if you have a lot of them, you can do what you want. So the private equity deal for Utah fascinates me, but the BYU fan base, as someone who angered them very much last fall, I can tell you there's a lot of passion there, right? And I'm assuming they got a lot of money, and so I don't think that fan base could be outspent if they decided they wanted to outspend people.
I do remember that. I was not going to bring it up, but I did stand up for you a bunch.
I apologize. No. I wanted to bring it up because we haven't talked, but and everyone has been great to me about that. But that was a bad move, and I said it was a bad move, and that's why it no longer lives on the internet.
Okay, fair enough, and we'll let people go look it up if they want to. But I like you, do not live on the internet. I believe it's where cowards go to feel brave. Good for you for owning it, apologizing, and moving on. But before I set you loose, I will kick the tires with you on a dynamic that continues to worry people that are not a part of the SEC or the Big Ten, and that simply is the future of this sport, with Congress trying to get involved to fix it. And, you know, the language in some of the pieces written is somewhat comical because it just underscores that we are living in a P2 world, not a P4 world. When the dust settles and college football settles into whatever the reality is that's actually somewhat permanent, Ryan, what does it look like?
I've never been a believer in this AFC, NFC Super League thing. I don't think that's going. It's going to happen. You know, Roy Kramer is the smartest person I've ever talked to when it comes to collegiate athletics. For folks that don't know, he was the commissioner of the SEC forever. He's the one that came up with the championship game. He came up with the BCS. He came up with divisions. He came up with all these things. And Roy Kramer told me 100 times that he did not see a 2-conference world. He saw a 4-conference world. And so I think there's room out there for it. And I think that, too, I keep thinking about my buddy Mike Leach, speaking of Texas Tech. And Leach used to just randomly at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would text me, yeah, Congress, they'll fix it. They fix everything. And this case, I think Congress might be the push, because we had Greg Sankey on Marty McGee on Saturday morning, and he is a man I admire very much, but he sounds exhausted. And I think they're all reaching that point. And he also was very adamant on our show. He said, everyone keeps writing about the Super League and everybody keeps talking about the Super League. And he goes, I have never once had any conversation with anyone at the Big Ten about a Super League. So I don't think that's where it's going. I think there is what we would call a Power Four, structure that's coming one day. I mean, I live here in North Carolina. And, UNC, which is one of the biggest brand names in sports, they're in the College World Series, and they are the hinge of whether the ACC will survive, and they want the ACC to survive. And I think that obviously we all want the Big 12 to survive. We all can agree the world would be better off if some semblance of the original Pac-12 was still around, and that includes the teams that were in it. And so I think I don't believe in a two-team league. I don't believe in a two-team Super League. I think that if anything else, we might have a deal where it's Big Ten and SEC, and then the ACC and Big 12, finally doing this alliance thing we were all promised, and pool that money. So I feel better about it now than I used to, because when Greg Sankey looks at me and says, we're definitely not doing this and we're definitely not doing that, and I think that when he says he's more concerned about non-Power Four leagues than people realize, I tend to believe him, and we'll see if he proves me out.
The Alliance, Ryan, the Alliance. I forgot about the Alliance.
That was great. Well, so everyone did.
Yeah.
Everyone, including the people that announced it. They all forgot it about 2 hours later, right?
Look, man, enjoy the College World Series. Always a pleasure. Be well and safe travels, okay?
Hey, appreciate you always, and I hope to see you sooner than later.
All right, Ryan McGee, one of my favorites to talk college football with, on Twitter at ESPN McGee, host of the Marty and McGee Show on ESPN Radio. Always appreciate his time. Want to let you know that In This Moment and Hollywood Undead are taking over the complex on October the 20th. ESPN 700 wants to send you and your concert buddy to the show. Tune into the Sean O'Connell Show this week for a chance to score a pair of tickets. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Coming up next, more college football with another good college football guest, Spencer Hall. It is Thursday, so Sports Court with our friends at Handy and Handy. Then it's time for the 5 o'clock hour, and we will say goodnight at 6 on a Thursday drive right here on ESPN 700. This is a family-friendly show, young man. What are you trying to do with a little Wu-Tang Clan?
I use the radio edit.
All right, that's fair. Wu-Tang performed at halftime of the Knicks-Spurs game last night. At halftime when the Spurs were up by 29 points. Somehow the Knicks won that game. Spencer Hall, what a pleasure to see him on the rundown today. Spencer, how are you, buddy? I'm
at about line 16 in that, where he says ultraviolet shine blind forensics. Yeah. It is a Wu-Tang day because I think we're all Knicks fans, even if we know that we're going to regret doing this when we're confronted with the Knicks fans of 2027.
Yeah, these videos are wild, dude. I mean, I'm a lifelong Knicks fan, and I'm not familiar with just going around the city and beating the tar out of anyone who's wearing Spurs jerseys.
I mean, do you want New York or do you not want New York?
Fair.
You know,
yeah.
You don't. I'm sorry, there are no substitutions at this restaurant, right? You get the whole enchilada. You get New York for good and for bad. I'll talk about the good, by the way. Mariska Hargitay. You know why? Because I did some cred check on Mariska Hargitay. I wasn't really familiar with her game as a Knicks fan. But Mariska Hargitay, I went back and looked at the photo tool. She's there for like those 29-win Knicks teams. She's there as the only entertainment when they show her on the screen and say, here's Law and Order cast member Mariska Hargitay. She sprinted. She did 2 shows yesterday. I'm sorry. Yeah, she did 2 shows yesterday, and she sprinted from them on foot alone to get to the game.
Wow.
Yeah, Mariska Hargitay, all respect to you. That is a real fan.
I'm very impressed. While we're in the space, we usually talk to you about college football, and we'll get to some of that here. But I am still I'm a sports talk radio host who has a 4-hour show every afternoon, and I don't know how to articulate how that happened last night. What was that like for you to watch that comeback?
It was one of those out-of-body experiences where you say, okay, I'm watching the best moment in someone's life. Because you watch sports because you want that. You want that. If you've had that hit once in your life, even at half dosage, if you've had a game like that where you say, I'm never going to forget this, coming back from 29 down in Game 4 of the NBA Finals, not just, by the way, as any other team, because there have been teams that have been good before. I think people need to think about it this way. The Knicks have never been good. I know they have a title from 73 and from 70, all right? I know that they have playoff appearances since then. That's functionally never. That's not just in, like, my lifetime. That's before my lifetime. That's several. Like, they haven't been good in 3 generations. So for this to happen, the people who even love the Knicks the most didn't have faith that they were going to come back from 29 down. And I know, like that's, you can focus on, oh man, the Spurs blew that. I don't think they matter here. I really don't. That's not what this story is about. So I hope that if you're even watching this, that you can put aside maybe any distaste or dislike you might even have for the Knicks and just go, man, I want that. I want that hit. I want what Indiana had in college football this year. I want what the Knicks are getting right now. It's validating because, Indiana overcame historic incompetence and, like 100 years of being bad. If they can do it, anyone can. If the Knicks can overcome being owned by James Dolan, your team can accomplish whatever they want to.
The last point is the best point. That dude plays kazoo in his own band and makes his employees go to his concerts around New York City. So it's a weird dynamic. Now, again, as a Knicks fan who has seen everything on the wrong end, that building is famous for shots typically made from the other team. I still am not confident that they're going to get this done, dude. I don't know if that's the PTSD in me, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that's why you're a Knicks fan. It's okay. I'm here to tell you, by the way, bound with confidence, Knicks in 5.
Oh, wow.
Knicks in 5.
Wow.
Yeah, Knicks in 5. And I can give you actual reasons for that. Like the total number of playoff games in terms of experience on the Spurs side is 60. Combined on the entire roster is 60. You're playing the Muppet Babies of the NBA. They're really good. They're ahead of schedule. They've gotten this far off of being young and phenomenally talented. But in terms of experience, they are in deep water and way over their head. So there's a rational reason, but you don't want that. Irrationally, what you want to hear is Knicks in 5. That's what Ghostface Killa said last night, by the way. Knicks in 5. It's like, we got this. And they were down 29.
Yeah, wild. At one point, I think however ESPN does that whole like, hey, here's your percentage of winning. It was like 99.6% San Antonio. What do you see when you watch Victor Wembanyama play, though? As far as how different that experience seems to be compared to other basketball players you've watched in the past.
He's incredible. He's phenomenal. He's also going through precisely what most young players go through when they go through their first run through the NBA playoffs in a big way, whether it's to the conference finals or the finals. Reminder, they won the Western Conference in what we assumed were the finals against the Thunder, and they were brilliant. In retrospect, that's probably more of a judgment on their youth and potential talent than how they were actually going to pan out, because they are ahead of schedule. There's a bunch of 21, 22, 23-year-olds on that team. You can get away with some of that, but when you get into the extended postseason, when you get into, like 12 games and 16 games, and then you're talking about knowing how to manage that and that level of intensity and scrutiny. And I think you've seen, by the way, also Victor Wembanyama still learning what he is in this league. He's still figuring out what he's going to be. And I think a player like that can sometimes have option paralysis because he is so good and so big and so physically gifted. You've seen in this series, okay, maybe he's not going to the paint enough. Okay, they put him in the paint and he starts scoring inside. And by the way, still working on refining that game. I guarantee you his inside game, his post game, especially as he gets older, is just going to get better and better technically because he is that dedicated to it. But then, okay, maybe Victor's too much in the paint. Maybe he needs to float out. Okay, he floats out and he takes threes. Well, that's a hazardous game because you get steadier production if you're underneath the basket, right? And Wembanyama's good for maybe 3 threes a game. I'm getting very in the weeds about this, but point being, he's going to be a lot of things. But the one great thing that Victor Wembanyama might be, that's still a couple of years off. You're seeing him lose, and that's what you have to do in the NBA. Michael Jordan had to lose. That's how, like when you talk about, okay, all right, when's this guy going to show us something? Okay, the greatest player I ever watched play got manhandled by the Detroit Pistons for years, not once. This is once for Victor Wembanyama. And I watched Jordan get manhandled for years before he went over the top.
Yeah, had to deal with a pretty good Celtic team, too. I mean, Jordan set the playoff record, 63 points scored at Boston Garden, but people may not understand that they lost that game. I mean, this has always very much been a rite of passage league. I just felt like if there was anyone that might be able to break that, it might be this dude. But your point is well taken. Knicks in 5. I certainly would enjoy seeing that as it pertains to how tough it's been cheering for them for a long, long time. Let's move over here, Spencer, of course. Since you and I last spoke, and we're broadcasting a mile away from Rice-Eccles Stadium, as you know, as you joined us in studio a few years back, Kyle Whittingham lives in Ann Arbor now, which still is a weird sentence to say out loud. But the longtime head coach of Utah football is now coaching Michigan football. How did you kind of digest that storyline?
It was curious, but on the other hand, I'm trying to be very fair about it. Players can go from team to team now. And I guess Kyle took a look at that and said, hey, I'm going to be the first coach to leave a big job for a big job. I am joking. I'm not being serious. This is the kind of thing that happens. And I think it's the kind of thing that happens, especially at the end of a tenure when you're not really sure what you are anymore. And Utah was in a situation where they had a coach in waiting. Those are always touchy because inevitably people's jobs are tied to whether you stay. People's jobs are sometimes tied to whether you go. And I think in the end, he did not feel comfortable anymore being the person everyone was waiting on leaving. I get that. Like if you've set everything up and you've done everything transitionally to set up a smooth port over, right, of a smooth next stage, then at one point you become superfluous. And whether, by the way, that's like whether that's realistically, am I thinking that Utah wouldn't be better with Kyle Whittingham as coach this year? No, Of course, I think they'd be better with him as coach. It's always hard when you're doing a new administration and when you're breaking in a new coach, even if he's taking on a new role. That new role is challenging, and you're going to see Morgan Scalley, learn on the job because there is no substitute for actual game experience for whatever job you're doing. But I think at one point, Whittingham looked up and said, I've pretty much painted myself in a corner here, and I'm going to be way more comfortable trying something new than I am being somebody who has already kind of written himself out of this story, if that makes sense. Is that you're local? I mean, I observe this from people I talk to and at a distance, but that to me seems to be the case.
Yeah, that's a good way to characterize it. It was really odd because we're the broadcast home of Utah football, so we want to be good partners. And I went to school there in the 90s, and I have good relationships and get some good intel. And I was informed pretty early on that Witt did not want to step down, and then told that he actually asked for a contract extension and a raise. And I was really hesitant to go with that on air because I didn't really know. And then as a result of a public records request, some documents were released and some emails between the athletic director, Mark Harlan, and Witt's agent were released. And it turned out that was true. Kyle wanted to stay. He wanted more money. He wanted a raise, and he wanted an extension. And my understanding of what was happening behind the scenes, Spencer, is that a lot of the donors, a lot of the money people were ready for Morgan. And I think it's safe to say, based off of the exchanges that were released, that the athletic director, Mark Harlan, and Kyle Whittingham weren't necessarily going and playing golf after practices. I don't know that was a great relationship. So it was kind of this feeling where it was like, all right, thanks so much for everything that you built, but we are ready for this next generation because we think it's Morgan's time. But I don't know that anyone, as I often joke on the show, I would have loved to be in the room when Mark Harlan got the alert and said, wait, Kyle got what job? Because no one knew the Michigan job was going to come open because Sharon Moore hadn't done the historic fumbled the bag that he ended up doing. Because what came about is that the only job Kyle couldn't take based off his contract was BYU. So then the Michigan job comes open and they interview a bunch of candidates and they land on Kyle. But because there was nothing in place, Kyle still received his buyout of like $13 million and said, okay, and also I'll take 6 coaches and 5 players. And by the way, I'll take the BYU defensive coordinator and a couple players down there, and I'm going to Ann Arbor. So the way it all went down was really something that was unprecedented as far as the news cycle here in little Salt Lake City, Utah. It was rather surreal.
That's what happens when you set up a successor. That's the problem. There's going to be a lot of tension towards the end anyway. But when you set up a successor, all of those things come in play. And frankly, for anybody who is fond of anybody who's out there is fond of playing video games where, you have to build a roster. I don't know if you played 82-0, which was this game where you built like your perfect 5-man NBA squad. And, you have so many points to spend on a roster. If I'm looking at the coach and the coach is getting up there in years, I get why the boosters made that call because they're looking at it saying, hey, we got X amount of money. We could spend some more on players at this point. And we could cut down on coaching staff. I get that. There's reasons for everybody to do what happened here. And I get that. I think Michigan got a real good deal out of this.
Yeah, no, for sure. Last thing on this, the other thing I kind of got a kick out of is I always take the pulse on how big a news story is as far as how much does the newsroom want to talk to you instead of going and doing a hit on the local sports show, or how many people out of state are inquiring about interviews with people here that know, that we have worked with Kyle and we know Kyle. And I was quite stunned. Like people like you know Witt, obviously we do out here. I was quite stunned at how many national college football fans were kind of like, is that the dude that coaches Utah? Yeah, Utah's pretty good every year. Like a lot of people got to know Witt. I often use this line. Witt became more famous in 48 hours getting the Michigan job than he did in 32 years on staff as Utah's coach.
Yeah, he did have a bit of a booster, though, and it's this. The booster in this case was the booster rocket for this story is Michigan applied a Band-Aid immediately to a bleeding wound that was the Sharon Moore story.
Yeah.
And that move on Michigan's part, probably the move of the offseason. It is in terms of, okay, good job. Because everything Michigan had done to that point was wrong and had been a disaster. And then they go out and immediately get a guy who, even those who were vaguely familiar with him, like you're talking about, said, oh yeah, they're real good. Okay, cool. and guess what we're talking about now? Something else. On to talking about anything else other than what happened at Michigan.
Yep. Of course, both Utah and BYU play in the Big 12 Conference, and college football has been dominated with the news cycle over the past few weeks with the Brendan Sorsby situation, and just kind of wanted to kick the tires with you on where you're at with the entire thing. I mean, I've tried to cover it. We had like an addiction specialist on earlier in the show to help us understand what the medical community believes about treatment for gambling and what that looks like, and what recovery is like and what you need in place. And then there's the whole like, well, you wouldn't put an alcoholic in as a Jack Daniels rep. So if this is the face of sports gambling, suddenly you're throwing him right back into the space that seemed to get him into trouble. I try to be understanding and approach it with empathy for the person, and then understand, like, wait a second, this has always been the one thing that you're not supposed to do if you play or coach in a sport. It is plastered on every single locker room, yet Jeffrey Kessler, who is very good at what he does, ultimately found the judge in the district to give him the injunction he was looking for, and it does look like Texas Tech is going to have their quarterback. Spencer, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, it's insane. I think for the Big 12 themselves have to be pulling their hair out, because the product itself that college football sells is compromised by the suspicion that any of them are gambling. That is the market reality here. And because nobody really owns college football, we have a bunch of people who offer it as good or as a service, depending on how you look at it. And we pay a certain price. You pay for Utah football tickets. I pay for Florida football tickets. I patronize a larger concern called the SEC. It's the Sam's Club of football, right? And the Big Ten's Costco. And they sell this thing that we enjoy. The quality of that and the legitimacy of it is threatened by gambling. I understand the concerns over this young man's health. I also think that the people using that are disingenuous, and they're knowingly disingenuous. Kirby Hocutt of Texas Tech had the audacity to say, as a father of two sons, what would I want my son doing? I'd want him playing football. That's cool. I got to admit, if my son had been gambling on football, I'd want him playing football too. Do you know why? He's my son, and I'm going to want things for him, even if it's wrong. And I don't think the Big 12 should tolerate it. I don't. I think Texas Tech is so full of it on this. And I can't be mad at them for that, because I'll be expecting a university to have shame about these things. I can't do that, because universities haven't had shame about college football at any point. They've managed to not pay their employees and call it a system for over 100 years. And now that they get paid, they're still going to revert to, let's keep this business going at any and all costs. I don't want to be really preachy about it. I have close relatives, by the way, who are alcoholics who work in bars. Literally. It can be done, and I hope he's well. But I don't think people are invoking that for sincere reasons. I think they're using it as a distraction. But Brendan Sorsby shouldn't be playing football, because the thing that he's doing, and I'm like speaking for the leagues who like get television contracts and television money and then funnel them to schools off of this and distribute those funds. It's a threat to the core product. No other sport would let this fly. Specifically, by the way, at the volumes that Sorsby was gambling at, which were small amounts in incredibly frequent patterns of wagering. Like, he was wagering on everything, like $2 or $3 on everything. So, I mean, I don't think he should be playing. If I were a league, I would consider it a threat to the product itself. But there's also this. This is how courts work. I don't think this is some big watershed moment. I don't think you need to be concerned about the future of the sport or the integrity. We're waiting on potentially another judge or another appeal to change all of this. I don't think it'll happen in time, and I think that's why he'll continue to play until something else comes down the pike. But that's also how the legal system works. Have you ever tried to get a judge to hurry? They don't. That's why they're judges.
So when it comes to what the Big 12 could or should do over the past 24 hours, the Texas Attorney General and Jeffrey Kessler have sent letters to Brett Yormark threatening litigation and legal action should they try to implement anything, some sort of 3.6 bylaw or whatever is out there. The threat is if the Big 12 tries to do anything, then Jeffrey Kessler and now the Texas Attorney General, they're threatening to use legal action. So I'm not sure what's next here. Spencer, what do you think?
I mean, everyone's got lawyers. If I were the Big 12, I'd say go ahead. Try it. We've got attorneys too. They can argue all day until they are blue in the face. And while I'm not an attorney, I do suspect that what I've seen from the initial letter that the Office of the Texas Attorney General, it's not Ken Paxton, it's actually their antitrust head. It would be under antitrust law. And I'm very intrigued about how they're going to spin this as an antitrust concern, especially when the Big 12 was just one provider of college football. We don't necessarily have monopolies. You can make a claim that we have an oligopoly or an oligarchy in terms of college football, but it's not a monopoly, and it's going to be real hard to prove under that. Don't ever pay. By the way, again, this is for anybody who's ever dealt with an HOA. Congratulations. You're already 3 steps ahead in this entire debate over Brendan Sorsby and whether there's going to be litigation, because if you've ever dealt with an HOA, they'll send you a letter. Ooh, from an attorney. Ooh. Everybody's got attorneys. They can send a letter too. We can play this game all day.
So as it pertains to what we could see in the Big 12 conference this year, I do feel like Texas Tech has earned the right for all of us to say out loud, it's probably them and everybody else. Their schedule, just listen to what Steve Sarkisian had to say, is not necessarily all that daunting. Assuming that they have their starting quarterback back, it does feel like they're the team to beat. If Brigham Young was the second best team in the Big 12 last year, Tech stomped them twice. This is Morgan Scalley's first year as a head coach. I think Utah's got some things to be excited about, but what are your thoughts on what we could see in the Big 12 this upcoming season?
I think it will be Texas Tech and everyone else, but they're still going to have to replace talent on defense for one. They're going to have to figure out how to work with Sorsby, who is not a plug-and-play quarterback. And by that, I mean he's not the kind of guy that you just put out there and say, okay, good, he'll run himself. No, he's got certain limitations, particularly when it comes to, midfield and downfield accuracy that you're going to have to work around. Is he a better choice than what they've had? Yeah, he is. But I don't know if he's going to have the same grade of defense behind him. Additionally, we're starting to get the season is getting longer and longer and longer. So Texas Tech's real trick that they're going to pull off is having a deeper roster than everybody else. That's it. There's two things that are going to give you strength into November, December, and the playoff push if you make it. And those are roster depth and clarity of purpose. And I know that sounds vague, but what I really mean is, are you Indiana? Do you have a simple set of plays that everyone can execute? Because now everyone in college football is starved for time. And when you're starved for time, you get starved for clarity in terms of, okay, who does what? What are we doing on this play? When we see this, we do X. That's it. And, you have limited practice time, and coaches have to recruit as well as game plan. And what Indiana did better than everybody else, when they say, okay, well, how did Indiana do it? You go, well, they did it because everyone was on the same page, and they had people who knew what they were doing, and they were 2 or 3 deep at every position. Now, not 5-star deep, right? But a 3-star who knows what they're doing, who is on the second string, is invaluable now. You have to be pretty good up and down the roster. And if you do that perfectly and you get the best possible transfers and everyone knows what they're doing, then you are going to be better than 98 to 99% of the teams you play. And, yeah, that can include Ohio State, because we saw Indiana do it. So what Texas Tech's challenge is going to be in mastering the Big 12, and what Morgan Scalley's going to have to learn on the job, is how to run this new system. Because that didn't used to be the case. Like, you used to just be able to, stack them and rack them. Like, that was like Alabama could come out, didn't have to pay players above the board, and they could say, hey, we have a roster full of 4 and 5 stars and can't miss. Georgia used to be able to do that. It's the one thing that the SEC has been really slow to catch up with, is the new system of building a roster up and down and then securing them and making sure everyone's on the same page.
All right, Spencer, before I say you lose, for our listeners that may not be familiar, among the tools in his tool belt Spencer is able to present is a comprehensive breakdown of the beautiful game, and we are about, 26 hours and 30 minutes away from the U.S. men's national team beginning their journey as the World Cup is being played on our soil for the first time since 1994. What does a successful World Cup cycle for the U.S. men's national team look like, Spencer?
Don't embarrass us. That's what it's going to look like. Don't embarrass us. Get out of group play, maybe. Play reasonably well, because we still don't have a clear identity on what we're going to do, and we still don't really have, I think, any realistic expectations of what we're going to be as a soccer team. There are so many teams more interesting and better than us at this point, and that's before you get into any of the bad vibes surrounding this World Cup, which the World Cup, by the way, will dispel in large part. Like, the World Cup does a great job at overcoming itself, and by itself I usually mean FIFA, or in this case I mean the FIFA and the United States government, which has already decided one guy can't come just because of where he's from. Like, one referee can't come, and has already harassed several different teams at U.S. Custom and Immigration, despite having visas that they've had approved for months at this point. So it'll still work, though. It'll still work because the World Cup always works. And the one part that you shouldn't count to work is you shouldn't say, hey, if I'm a newbie coming in, if I'm just like, hey, how's the United States going to do? I'm like, think about something else. Just don't just be happy if we score. And if we don't be surprised.
Who's your pick to win the thing?
There's my heart and there's my head. So if you want my head, I'll always go Spain, because it just seems like a reliable bet. And if you want my heart, I am always pulling for underdogs. But I have to pick you want me to pick a realistic underdog here?
Yeah, let's do that.
Like a realistic underdog. I always root for Colombia, man.
All right.
And you know why? Do you know why I root for Colombia? Because they're fun. Oh my God. You will never have more fun with fans than you will have with, like, Colombia fans, Scottish fans. Hey, Uzbek fans are going to be here in Atlanta. And I will tell you, sleeper for most fun people you will meet are the Uzbeks. It's their first time qualifying, and they party hard.
It sounds like a good time. Hey, where can our listeners go find all your work these days, bud?
You can go to channel-6.ghost.io. That is my newsletter, Channel 6, the newsletter we do twice a week. And you can go listen to the Shutdown Fullcast, where we sometimes talk about college football. Sometimes.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure. Be safe, okay?
Thanks.
All right. The great Spencer Hall typically joins us during college football season, but as you can hear during that interview, he's a little bit of a jack of all trades, can really talk about and cover a little bit of everything. Appreciate his time. Stops by today courtesy of our friends at You Went to Golf, and it's time now for your You Went to Golf PGA update. Celebrate Father's Day this year at You Went to Golf. Unleash Dad's swing with the all-new Titleist GTS drivers. Find the perfect GTS driver for Dad to gain superior distance, accuracy, and ball speed. You Went to Golf by Worldwide Golf. Get there. The world of the PGA Tour is up north with our friends in Canada. It's the RBC Canadian Open, where Sahith Theegala, Emilio Grillo, Brooks Koepka, wow, and Sam Burns are all at 6 under par, leaders in the clubhouse. But our guy, Tony Finau, is right behind them at 5 under with Adam Svensson, who's Canadian. Shane Lowry is there as well. So a lot of big-time good golfers atop the leaderboard at the RBC Canadian Open, at the TBC Toronto, at Osprey Valley. So there you go. We'll catch a break. It is Thursday. You know what that means. A little sports core with our friends at Handy and Handy coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday right about now with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How we doing?
Spence, good. How you doing? Happy Thursday.
All good here. Appreciate your time. So glad to have you on today because every single day and honestly every single hour it does seem like we get an update with the situation regarding Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby. Of course, as we talked about, he hired the Michael Jordans of attorneys. Jeffrey Kessler gets his injunction. The Big 12 is meeting to do something. The Texas Attorney General is involved. Jeffrey Kessler has sent a letter to the Big 12 threatening legal action. So there's a lot going on. I'm just going to lay back. You guys update us.
Well, Spence, you have a little more of updates than I have. I got the earlier articles today, and apparently something else come through. But a couple of the stories we're going to talk about here, you're either living under a rock or asleep if you haven't heard these national stories. The first one is the Sorsby case. And as we know, I won't go into the background, he was ruled ineligible by the NCAA for gambling addiction, which actually broke a black and white rule the NCAA rule has, and Sorsby admitted to it. So he's ineligible. So what does he do? He goes and hires Kessler, and he sues the NCAA, and the first thing people do is they file a motion for a preliminary injunction, which basically says, hey, we don't like your rule, but we want an injunction right now that would prevent you from enforcing the rule, enjoin you from enforcing the rule, and we can fight about the issue down the road, but we want to do that. So I got to admit, Spence, I was wrong last week on this program. I said he's not going to get the injunction. He's not going to play college football, but lo and behold, he does have Jeffrey Kessler, and it came out this week that the judge did grant his motion for temporary injunction. So just for the listeners out there, in a temporary injunction, no doubt Kessler came in and he laid out a lot of case law with situations similar to this, and he wanted to apply it for the situation. But the elements of a temporary injunction are you have to show irreparable harm, prove that you will suffer immediate or reversible injury if the injunction is not granted. Then you need to show, it's a balancing thing, you show that the likelihood that you will succeed on the merits. Now, Kessler did a really interesting thing in this case. All of these eligibility cases have been what? They've been antitrust cases that you're being restricted from competing. But they filed a breach of contract claim. That's their main claim, their legal claim against the NCAA, saying that the NCAA breached their duties to Brendan Sorsby and didn't protect him. It's a breach of contract. So that's the merits of the claim, the substantive issue of the claim. And so you've got to show the likelihood of success on the merits. And understand, this is the judge hearing this that will hear this down the road. And he ultimately came in and he decided to grant the injunction. And his claim for irreparable harm, the thing that I'd like to see the opinion, I haven't been able to read it, but apparently the irreparable harm is that he would have additional mental health issues, that he won't be able to be part of a team and have the camaraderie and teammates. He won't get coaching to prepare for the NFL. And he claimed that these were irreparable harm, irreversible damages. And, a judge, people are talking about this judge is dirty, whatever. Well, these are factors that you balance, and a judge could work this in. It might have been a sympathy factor, but he could work this into his decision. And, he's going to face an appeal, so he needs to lock down his decision on that. And so another interesting thing that we saw that the judge, he kind of played Moses in this, and he split the baby. And Kessler was really smart. Kessler said, hey, grant the injunction, but in doing it, you know what? Penalize him a couple of games, suspend him a couple of games, so there will be punishment there. And the judge went with that, and that wasn't even really what the NCAA was looking for. So I think that was really smart. And another thing that came out was apparently there's this rule called the rule of restitution that the NCAA has that says, okay, if we lose an injunction, but down the road we ultimately prevail, we can go back and seek restitution, attorney's fees, that type of thing. Well, the judge kind of cut that off. He said, no, you don't even get your rule of restitution if this thing succeeds on the merits. So I'll let Garrett talk about what's going on with Texas Tech and the outcry and all the stuff, but that's what's going on there on that side.
And by the way, Preston, don't apologize for being wrong. We were all wrong. Nobody saw this coming. But Garrett, let's go over to you.
Yeah, well, it is kind of Texas Tech against the world right now. It seems like in some ways, but like you mentioned, Spence, so the Attorney General of the state of Texas, Ken Paxton, who, as it so happens, is currently running for the U.S. Senate. So, I mean, we could talk a lot about, the PR angle of all of this and politics and that sort of thing. But he's come out pretty strongly backing Texas Tech here. Sent a letter to the Big 12 and Brett Yormark and said that they would face, quote, substantial liability, if they went through with these threats not to play Texas Tech or to penalize Brendan Sorsby any further. And so part of what he says that that substantial liability would be claims of breach of contract and antitrust. And so the breach of contract is basically that, schools have contracts with Texas Tech to play them. The conference has contracts with their member schools. And then the antitrust part is to say, well, hey, if all of the Big 12 schools get together and gang up against Texas Tech, that would fall under antitrust law. So kind of interesting legal theories there. Well, that's been followed up by Cody Campbell. He's, of course, the billionaire booster for Texas Tech. And he's doing some saber rattling, too, and also throwing out that antitrust word and saying he's ready to sue. And I'm not sure if that means he would be a plaintiff, if he really has standing for that, or if he's the right person, or if it just means he's going to fund the litigation that could be brought. So, there's a lot of threats going on, and I think meetings right now, and so there's a moving target, moving story.
All right. Do you guys want to unpack any more of this, or do you want to move on to the next story?
I got one. So I guess what the Big 12 or whatever's trying to do is they're trying to say, hey, we want to put pressure on Texas Tech that they will make a decision, right? And apparently Texas Tech, they're not going to make a decision to suspend Sorsby. They're just sitting back and saying, hey, the judge ruled, he got his punishment, I don't think the Big 12 will they'll boycott the games because of all the things around it. But I think Brendan Sorsby showing up in stadiums, there's going to be a lot of attack from the fans, aren't there?
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Tech is not going to, decide that this young man cannot play. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think they want their starting quarterback, and with the Attorney General getting involved and more letters being sent threatening legal action, my guess is if Tech has their way, he's going to be under center. But if you're ready to move over to the next story, very sad one. Carmelo Anthony, not that one, was spelled with a K.
Not that one.
Found guilty of murder. It was a stabbing at a track meet. And then 35 years was the sentence. And this has been a hot button story across the landscape of the country. So fill us in here.
Yeah, it has been a hot button story because of a race factor that's been brought up. But we were going to talk just kind of more about some of the underlying legal issues, because that really wasn't a part of the trial at all with anything that was claimed. But I mean, the underlying facts are basically this is a crosstown track meet, and Carmelo Anthony's from one of the opposing schools, and he goes and sits in the tent for one of the other schools, and they're telling him, hey, get out of here, you're not on our team, get out of here, and he won't leave. And then, of course, there's a stabbing, the murder, just really tragic and horrible. He's under Texas law. I mean, he's 17 at the time, but charged as an adult. And like you mentioned, Spence, he was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison. And so his main defense, of course, was self-defense, which is a defense you see a lot, right? And so one of the questions for the jury is, of course, okay, well, he's saying he was shoved, right, and felt threatened, and his response is to use a knife. And so is that self-defense if it's not proportionate, right? That force is not proportionate. So that was kind of one of the big issues, but they have appealed, and so I guess it's really not over yet. And I think the appeal is going to involve some of these probably the self-defense jury instruction. It's always an uphill battle to overturn a jury verdict like this, especially where there were really multiple eyewitnesses to the incident. And so, this could be kind of the end of the we hear of this, but kind of some interesting issues.
All right, Preston, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, the things I read is just, as you mentioned, it's exploded into racial tensions. But just the evidence was that witnesses and even friends of his testified that Carmelo Anthony was the aggressor, and that this whole self-defense, the elements of self-defense is you got to have a reasonable belief that you're in danger of unlawful harm. There's an imminent threat. Danger must be happening right now or about to happen immediately. And your response has to be proportional, meaning that there's talk that this Austin Metcalf? He may have pushed Carmelo Anthony, pushed him, and then Carmelo Anthony brought out a knife and stabbed him in the chest. The claim is, that self-defense, if someone's got a pea shooter, you can't pull out an Uzi. So those are the elements of self-defense, and they didn't fly, and the jury, short deliberation came out and found and convicted him.
Moving over to a story out of the NFL, 5 law firms allegedly defrauded the NFL concussion settlement program. First time hearing of this. What's going on?
Yeah, this one isn't as exciting, but we talked about years ago in 2013. There was all the CTE litigation, the class action stuff and going on, all the retired NFL players, the concussions, all of the effects of it. Well, there was class action lawsuit, and ultimately the NFL, there was a settlement, and $1 billion+ was set aside in a concussion fund, a settlement fund. So since that time, we haven't been hearing about it, but a lot of these former NFL retired players are being represented by lawyers, and they're submitting their claims. And as part of submitting their claims, they have to submit medical documentation to support their claims and what there are. And, one of the claims is Parkinson's disease. And there are there are doctors that are recognized to submit these claims. But these law firms, it was reported that there was, 87 plaintiffs, and it resulted in about $95 million in settlements, and there was a pattern. The special master noticed a pattern of stuff going on, and that these doctors that they were using to apparently drum up, fraudulent or partially fraudulent claims. So now they've come out and said, hey, you law firms these 5 law firms that have been doing it, there were 5 law firms, and they were using the same doctors, and it just looked kind of suspicious there. And so they've disqualified these law firms. They say, we're looking out for the best interest of these retired players and want to make sure these claims are legitimate. And one interesting piece that I read, that one of the lawyers, this is pretty interesting, anyone local would recognize, old people local would recognize the name of Bart Oates. He was a former NFL player, but a BYU center that was a 3-time Super Bowl, former Pro Bowl player. And Oates, after he played in the NFL, guess what he did? He got his law degree, and he's one of these lawyers that said Oates used similar methods involving diagnosis. Informants told auditors that he contacted retired players, allegedly promised Parkinson's disease diagnosis if they switched legal representation to his firm. So Oates is one of the guys that did it, and he's out, and there's no claim that there's any criminal charges being filed against him or these lawyers, but there's your local interest for today.
The legend, Bart Oates himself. Garrett, over to you.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that about Bart Oates. I mean, he was just cold calling retired NFL players and basically telling them, hey, we'll get you the Parkinson's diagnosis that you need, but switch law firms and come to ours, and we'll make sure that happens. So, yeah, yikes.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we are hitting the clock, so I do have to set you loose. We'll get to these other ones coming up next week. But before I catch a break, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how do they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, Spence, love coming on here. I got a quick question for you. The Knicks, seeing all these former Knicks players, do you think Oak's going to get into the next game, the final game?
Absolutely not.
He's going to be there in person?
No, Jim Dolan is a petty, pathetic little man. He's a strange, pathetic little man. There's no chance.
Okay. So we love coming on here. Handy and Handy, we're a personal injury law firm. love to hear from any of you out there. If you have a personal injury case, call us at 801-264-6677 or jump on our website at handylawutah.com.
Thanks, guys. Have an excellent weekend. Of course, as always, go Utes.
Go Utes. Go Utes, man.
Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The final hour of the program on a Thursday comes your way next on ESPN 700. All right, coming up next, we'll see who can take the leg up in the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup. The Golden Knights and the Hurricanes deadlocked to 2 games apiece. Tomorrow we get the U.S. men's national team. Mexico won their World Cup opener. 3 red cards handed out for the first time in the history of the World Cup. And then the NBA Finals is back on Saturday night between the Spurs and the Knicks after what was just a unbelievable night last night. The Knicks, for the first time in a long time, on the right side of history for a team that more often than not has been on the wrong side of history. We are less than 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. Of course, the Brendan Sorsby situation continues to unfold. Porter, my question to you before we say goodnight is simple. Spencer Hall seemed very confident that the Knicks are going to win this thing in 5. How confident are you that the Knicks will win this thing in 5?
Not as confident that we win in 5. I feel that there will be some sort of answer from San Antonio in this next game, but I am confident we get out of this one with the series. There are 38 teams rather in NBA history who have had a 3-1 lead in the NBA Finals. Only one of them have lost, and I'll tell you what, LeBron James is not walking through that door. So.
Yep, indeed. Draymond was talking about that last night on the dais. The Knicks are one of the teams that had a 3-2 lead and lost a 3-2 lead to lose the finals. That was to Houston in 94. If there's a stat that includes teams on the wrong side of things, the Knicks are usually on that list.
This is true. Let's avoid adding one to that list.
Knock on wood. But, man, last night was fun. Random story before we say goodnight. The Farms Golf Club in Rancho Santa Fe, California, their most famous member is a man named Phil Mickelson, who is no longer a member. This guy's fall from grace has been something else. So Phil Mickelson has been kicked out of his San Diego golf club over allegations that he made unwanted physical contact with a female employee. They apparently, he was playing, and they basically told him he had to get off the course. They took all the pictures down, Phil in the golf course. These allegations must be very, very serious. So we didn't have time to get to it today, but we'll try to get to it tomorrow. Porter, what's coming up on a weekend, Friday edition of the program?
Yeah, advice for guys at country clubs: leave the cart girls alone.
Yes.
They're usually under 18.
Advice for guys anywhere: the cart girls do not want to get hit on. They must deal with that all day, every day. Leave them alone.
Can confirm as a country club veteran up there.
Fair enough.
Chris Kamrani joins the show on a Friday.
Speaking of country clubs,
Dave McMiniman again for your NBA Daily Assist. Nick Olczyk talking some Stanley Cup, and Paul Pugmire, well, to talk some Phil Mickelson, of course.
I'm sure Paul's going to love digging into that topic. All right, we will say goodnight. Special thank you today to Ed Peterson, Craig Bolerjack, Ryan McGee, Spencer Hall. Fun show today. A lot of good college football, some NBA, some Jazz, some Knicks. If you missed any of the sound from the show, go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Download the mobile app. Take us on the go. That app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store for free. And then for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, please check out the podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. All the sound is up there, available for you guys whenever you can listen to it. If you have some time tonight, give us a subscription, a rating, a review, the things that we all ask you to do, because when you take time to do it, it actually does help us out. We would appreciate it. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Stanley Cup playoff hockey comes your way next after a quick break on your home of the Utes.